Mist rode low over the forest floor, curling around Sera Wynverra's boots as if it, too, were trying to hide. She tugged her cloak tighter, breath ghosting pale in the chill air. The moon was a thin shard behind the clouds, its light barely reaching through the dense lattice of branches overhead. It was late, too late to be out, but the fever in her patient's eyes had left her no choice. The right kind of willow bark didn't grow near the village. Only here, on the damp banks of the North Stream, did it take root with the iron-strong tang she needed. "Just a little further," she murmured, fingers brushing a low-hanging branch aside. "Then home. No more foolish risks tonight." Her words vanished into the quiet. No insect buzz, no owl call, only the faint rush of water somewhere ahead and the soft crunch of her own footsteps. The stillness prickled along her skin, raising the fine hairs on her arms. Forests did not fall silent without reason. Sera slowed. Her free hand slid toward the small leather pouch at her belt, fingers finding the familiar shapes inside. Dried rosemary, a chalk stub for runes, a folded strip of linen inked with the sigil of warding. Relief whispered through her. She might not be a battle mage or a court sorceress, but she was not defenseless. "Just the willow," she repeated, softer, as if the trees needed reassurance as much as she did. The stream appeared between the trunks, a dark ribbon reflecting a smear of moonlight. Sera knelt by the bank, her skirt hem soaking through at once. She reached for the pale bark she needed, and froze. The water stirred upstream. Then something heavy slumped against the bank with a wet thud. Sera's heart kicked hard. She crouched lower, the hood of her cloak shadowing her face, and peered along the bend. At first she saw only shadow and rock. Then the shape shifted, and her breath caught. Not rock, fur. A massive wolf lay half in the stream and half out, its thick gray coat darkened near the shoulder, where something jagged protruded. An arrow. Even from here she saw the way it glinted. Not ordinary iron, but blackened, etched with faint, unsettling runes. Witch-hunter work. Her body moved before her mind could argue. She splashed along the bank, water soaking her boots, fingers already digging into her pouch. The wolf came into full view. Bigger than any forest wolf had a right to be. Muscles coiled and powerful, even slack with weakness. Its ribs rose in shallow, labored breaths. Foam flecked its muzzle where it had bitten itself in pain. The arrow lay buried deep in its shoulder, just above the leg, the flesh around it ugly and swollen. "Easy," Sera whispered, though she knew it couldn't understand. "Easy, great heart. I mean you no harm." Its golden eyes cracked open at the sound of her voice. For a heartbeat their gaze locked, a startling, startling clarity in that molten stare. Not the emptiness of an animal succumbing to injury. Awareness. Intelligence. Wariness. And something else she couldn't quite name. Then its eyelids drooped again, the effort costing it. "Sera, this is foolish," she hissed under her breath, as if she were someone else she might be able to persuade. It could tear you apart. It could be one of them. A shifter. She had heard whispers of them, of course. Wolf-blooded nobles who prowled the night on silent paws, monsters and guardians both, depending on who told the story. In Varynmoor, the tales always ended at the same name, the Wolf Duke of Varynmoor. No one agreed on what he truly was, only that he was dangerous. Sera looked again at the arrow. A witch-hunter shaft, embedded in a creature that should have been too clever to be caught. A shifter, or a very unlucky beast. The arrow's shaft was blackened, feathered with crow's feathers bound in dark thread. The metal head was matte and wrong, drinking what little light there was instead of glinting. Iron blight, she realized, with a sharp drop in her stomach. It would have poisoned the wolf from the moment it pierced his flesh, spreading like frost through his veins. If she left now, the creature would die. Perhaps she should. Witches who tangled themselves with curses and royal edicts and the strange laws around shifters rarely came away unscathed. But the groan that rumbled out of its chest wasn't a threat. It was a sound of pure, exhausted pain. Sera exhaled, the decision settling like a stone in her chest. "Very well," she murmured. "Foolish it is." She pulled the leather pouch fully into her lap. Rosemary to steady her focus. A pinch of arden moss to draw out poison. One of the small, pale pebbles from her hearth that she kept for anchoring aether. Her fingers moved quickly, sure despite the pounding of her heart. She chewed the rosemary until its bitter taste flooded her tongue, then spat the softened leaves into her palm. With the moss, she pressed them into a paste against the stone. A faint warmth thrummed through her fingertips, the raw pulse of aether, waiting to be bound. Sera set the stone against the wolf's side, just below the wound. Its skin twitched under her touch, but it did not stir otherwise. "Easy, great heart," she whispered again. "I will be as swift as I can." She drew in a breath. Reaching inward, she found the well of magic that lived under her ribs. Bright and wild, like lightning trapped in glass. Every time she touched it, it frightened her a little. It was too much, too volatile. Once, in anger, she had shattered an entire shelf with a thought. Once, in grief, she had set her own hand on fire. But she had learned since then. Herbs steadied her. Patterns held. Tonight, at least, she hoped they would. She pressed her palm to the stone, the other bracing near the arrow, and whispered the focusing phrase she had crafted for healing. "By root and rein and breath within, mend what's marred and draw out pain." The last word was not quite right. Her late mentor had always scolded her for it. "Pain, Sera, not sin. You are not a priest." But the phrase had stuck, and Sera's magic had never seemed to mind. Heat surged through her arm and into the stone. Her breath caught at the familiar mix of awe and fear. The stone drank the warmth, then glowed faintly under her hand, a soft, steady blue. The wolf's body tensed, its ears flicked, lips drawing back to show long white teeth as the magic reached the wound. "I know," she breathed. "I know. Almost there." She shaped the magic, coaxing rather than forcing. Roots, she thought, like roots drawing poison from soil. Her mind pictured threads of light sliding into dark flesh, curling around the iron blight, pulling it back, back into the stone. The paste beneath her fingers burned cold as the aether did its work. The arrow began to loosen. Sera swallowed, sweat beading on her brow despite the chill. If she misjudged the flow, it could surge instead of seep, ripping through muscle and bone. The last person she had tried to heal that way still limped when the rain came. "Gentle," she whispered through gritted teeth. "Gentle, gentle." She felt it when the balance tipped. The magic strained, hungry to lunge forward, to burn everything that hurt in a single consuming blaze. The wolf shuddered under her, a whine tearing from its throat. "No!" Sera tightened her grip on the stone until her knuckles whitened. "You will not take more than I give you." She forced her breathing slow, steady, counted heartbeats. Imagine the energy thinning, dispersing, like water soaking into thirsty earth, rather than a wave smashing against rock. Her shoulders quivered with the effort. The glow dimmed, the paste cooled. Bit by bit, the iron's wrongness eased. When she was sure the worst of the poison had drawn out, she wrapped both hands around the arrow shaft. "Forgive me," she told the unconscious wolf. Then she pulled. It came free with a wet, sucking sound. Blood flowed hot over her fingers, bright and thick. Sera pressed the folded linen sigil hard against the wound, the inked rune flaring briefly as it sealed flesh. That should have been the end of it. But as she leaned back, dizzy, the aether inside her bucked. Something had gone wrong. The magic she had drawn out into the stone had not completely settled. It flickered now, restless, snagging on something unseen. The wolf's eyes flew open, golden, fierce, pain-bright. They met hers, and Sera felt the world twist sideways. For an instant, she was not kneeling at the edge of a stream, shaking with exertion. She was standing on a balcony under a high, starless sky, the wind full of snow and distant howls. She felt weight on her shoulders, a mantle, fur-lined and heavy, and the press of unseen gazes below. Then it was gone. Her vision snapped back to the forest. She staggered, dropping the stone. It hit the ground and crumbled to chalky dust, the last of the blue light leaking away. The wolf's gaze did not leave her. There was nothing animal in it now. No, that was unfair to beasts. It was too human, too aware. "You," Sera started, her voice breaking. The air shimmered. It was not the elegant, effortless transformation of the stories. It was a rough, shuddering thing, bones contorting, fur retracting, limbs bending and reshaping with wet, grinding sounds that made her stomach lurch. The wolf's form blurred, shrank, stretched. A man knelt where the wolf had been. He was bare-chested, trousers torn at the knee where they'd split during the shift. The wound at his shoulder still bled sluggishly around the edges of the linen ward, but the worst of the poison blackness was gone. Dark hair, sweat-damp and tangled, fell over his brow. His features were angular, cut sharp as if from stone. High cheekbones, a straight nose, a jaw set with stubbornness even in pain. Stubble shadowed his cheeks. His eyes, those same molten gold eyes, glowed faintly in the dimness as they fixed on her. Sera's heart gave a violent, confused kick. She lurched to her feet, nearly slipping in the mud, and stumbled backward. "You're shifter," he finished, voice rough as broken glass. "Yes." The word hung between them, thick as the mist. Shifter, noble, dangerous. And naked from the waist up, which Sera's mind, in some treacherous corner, noticed with immediate and mortifying clarity. She jerked her gaze away, focusing desperately on the trees over his shoulder. The trees were safe. Trees did not glow with faint golden light, or have shoulders quite that broad. "I should go," she said, too quickly. I wasn't here. You weren't here. None of this." "You pulled out an iron blight arrow." His voice cut through her babble, cool despite the rasp. "You stabilized a curse wound that should have killed me by dawn. You were very much here." She swallowed. "You don't know that. You were unconscious." "I was not." He shifted, bracing one hand in the mud, grimacing as the movement tugged his shoulder. "Though I would prefer to be at the moment." He winced. Guilt pricked at her. Of course he hurt. Her magic had numbed the worst of it, but it could not erase pain entirely. "You should not move," she said, some of her training returning as habit. "The poison may be drawn out, but your body still needs—" He laughed, short and humorless. "My body is the least of our concerns, witch." The word, on many tongues, was an insult. On his, it sounded like a simple fact. Sera's fingers curled into her palms. "You should not call me that where others might hear." "There is no one else here." He turned his head, gaze sweeping the dark forest. "There should not be, at least. That arrow belonged to a hunter. If he lingers, he may already be dead." She flinched. "I did not sense another soul." "Your magic, then, is stronger than I thought." He watched her, expression intent. "And poorly disguised." Sera's throat tightened. "If you mean to turn me over to them—" "If I meant you harm," he interrupted, "you would not be standing." She hesitated, studying him sidelong. The stories painted shifters as feral, uncontrollable. But there was nothing out of control in his gaze now. Calculating, yes. Guarded, certainly. But not mad. "Why were witch hunters shooting at you?" she asked. "They do not attack nobles, they serve them." His jaw flexed, the faint lines at the corners of his mouth deepening. Some nobles pose more inconvenience than others. That was not an answer. Sera bit the inside of her cheek. Bold, prying questions got witches in trouble, but questions also saved lives. Regardless, he said, as if dismissing the topic with effort, you have entangled yourself, Sera Wynverra. Her breath stuttered. How do you know my name? He tilted his head. Word of a hedge-witch who meddles with aether travels far, especially when she cures a miller's son of black lung in a single night. Sera's mouth went dry. That had been weeks ago. The miller had sworn discretion. Apparently his tongue had loosened more than coin at the tavern. If you know who I am, she said slowly, then you also know I have no wish to be dragged into the affairs of whoever you are. I helped because it was right, not because I seek favor. He smiled then, a flash of dry amusement that did dangerous things to his face. Whoever I am? Sera realized with a lurch that while she recognized the shifter for what he was, she had not named him. It was one thing to suspect a stranger of noble blood. It was another to put the story's title to a living, breathing man kneeling half-dressed in the mud. The Wolf Duke of Varynmoor, Kael Ardynorr. It fit him strangely well. I prefer not to assume, she said, lifting her chin. Prudent. He shifted again, testing his injured arm. The muscles bunched under skin still slick with river water. I am Kael Ardynorr, Duke of Varynmoor. You saved my life. The forest seemed to press closer around them, as if the trees were listening. Sera's knees went weak. She fought the urge to sink back into the mud. You saved my life. Said so plainly, as if it were nothing more than a fact to be catalogued between the temperature and the phase of the moon. You do not know that, she managed. You might have survived without me. His golden eyes narrowed, a faint glow licking at their depths. That arrow was iron blight. It was laid with a breaking curse. In another hour, the poison would have reached my heart. In another 2, the spell would have shattered my shifter form entirely. He paused. I do not exaggerate my own invincibility, witch. I know the scent of death when it is in my fur. She swallowed hard. The aether under her ribs stirred uneasily, responding to her spike of fear. It always did, mirroring her emotions like water mirroring the sky. She breathed out slowly, counting until it quieted. I am glad then, she said, voice soft but steady, that I came when I did. So am I, he said. The words were simple. The way he said them, not grudging, not grandiose, just honest, made something twist in her chest. He pushed himself, with clear effort, to his feet. The movement made Sera's healer instincts jangle. Stop that, she blurted. His brows rose. Stop what? Trying to stand like you are not half dead. She stepped forward before she could second-guess herself, hands hovering near his injured side. You should be resting. Your shoulder should be bound with something more than a single linen rune. You need warming, and herbs, and if we remain here, the witch hunters who shot me may return to confirm their work. The word we hung between them. We? She repeated, throat suddenly dry. His gaze flicked briefly to her hands, then back to her face. You drew them as surely as I did. They track magic, Wynverra. They will smell your aether on the air. Her stomach lurched. She had been careful. She always worked from within the safety of her cottage ward, or deep in forest hollows where no one ventured. But tonight she had rushed. Too much emotion, too little caution. The memory of the arrow's dark shaft shimmered in her mind. If they find me, she whispered, they will take me to the pyres. Yes, no softness there, only fact. If they find you. Sera's head spun. She had seen the black smoke from such pyres, distant columns on the horizon. The memory had chased her into her sleep for years. She had told herself that if she was careful enough, quiet enough, she could live her whole life without ever coming closer. Now the Wolf Duke stood in front of her, blood drying on his skin, telling her she had already stepped into the hunter's circle. "What do you want from me?" she asked, hearing the thinness in her own voice. "What I want is irrelevant," Kael said quietly. "What is required is this." He lifted his uninjured hand, palm outward. For a brief instant, the air around his fingers seemed to shimmer with a faint, silvery light that was not quite his own. Old magic. Old law. "Sera Wynverra," he said, and his voice took on a cadence that made the aether prick under her skin. "By ancient bond of fang and blood, I, Kael Ardynorr, acknowledge the life debt owed for the saving of my body and spirit. I offer you sanctuary under my protection, within my house and name, so long as breath remains to me." The words rolled over her like a physical force. She took a half-step back, heart pounding. "Stop! Don't say those things." "It is too late," he said, hand still raised. His eyes were very serious now, very focused. A life debt begun cannot be unspoken. "But I did not ask for it," she protested. "I do not want—" "Do you want to live?" he asked. The question sliced cleanly through her panic. Sera drew a breath. "Yes," she said, in a voice barely more than a whisper. "Of course." "Then you should not stand in this forest arguing with the Duke about old vows while witch hunters sniff the wind for your soul." He lowered his hand a fraction, though the faint shimmer around it remained. "You gave me back my life, Wynverra. In my people's law, that means I owe you mine. And given the state of the king's edicts, there is only one protection strong enough to hold against both hunters and court." She knew the answer before he said it. Dread and disbelief tightened in her chest. "No," she breathed. "Yes," he said quietly, "I must make you my duchess." The forest tilted a little. Sera stared at him, certain she had misheard. Certain this was some strange side effect of her overtaxed magic, a wild hallucination brought on by too many herbs and too little common sense. Your duchess," she repeated faintly. "As in, married?" Yes, there was no hint of jest in his tone. As in, married. She shook her head hard, as if to dislodge the word. "That is absurd." "It is inconvenient," he agreed. "Absurd would be leaving you here and hoping the hunters are as incompetent as the stories make them." "I am a hedge-witch," she said, quite certain her voice had gone shriller than dignity allowed. "I live in a cottage with a resident spider I have named Bram. I talk to plants. I am not a duchess," he supplied. "Yet, ever," she corrected, heat rushing to her cheeks. "I am not ever a duchess. You cannot simply decide." "I can," he said, "and I have." She gaped at him. Somewhere under the fear, indignation flickered. "Listen to yourself. You expect me to agree to this? To walk into your stone fortress and pretend to be your wife? To appease your people's laws? While every noble woman in your court stare at me like I am something tracked in on your boots? Many of them already stare at me as if I am something tracked in on their boots," he said dryly. "Adding you to the list will at least make the boot print more interesting." Against her will, the corner of her mouth twitched. She suppressed it at once. "This is not a jest." "I am not jesting," he exhaled slowly, some of the iron leaving his posture. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. "Sera, the king has declared that all witches must either present themselves for sanctification, and we both know that word for the lie it is, or be hunted as enemies of the realm. The only exceptions are those under a noble house's protection. A wife, under such law, is considered part of the house itself. She knew bits of this, rumors that had drifted even to her forest edge. She had assumed, perhaps hoped, that they would pass her by. She was small, unimportant, not worth the trouble. Apparently the king disagreed. "Could you not simply," she flapped a hand, searching, "adopt me as a cousin, a ward, a terribly distant relative?" "A noble may take wards only from noble blood," Kael said, "and my family tree is barren enough without inventing cousins by the dozen. A hastily produced relation would draw as much suspicion as a sudden wife, with far less legal anchor. The law around marriage is iron-bound. The king cannot gainsay a union made under the life-debt vow." Sera's stomach swooped. "You would marry me to defy the king?" "I would marry you to keep you alive," he said simply. "Defying the king is a secondary benefit." Her pulse thundered in her ears. Married to a man she had known for the span of a single strange night. A man who had spent most of that time as a wolf, bleeding in a stream. "I do not even know you," she whispered. "Which is a flaw we can remedy," he said. Her laugh came out half-strangled. "You speak as if you were arranging furniture." "Furniture rarely tries to argue." He paused. "Sera, consider the alternative. If you return to your cottage, they will find you. They will smell your magic in the herbs, the sigils, the very wood of your door. They will take you. And I will owe a life debt I cannot discharge, because you will be dead." The bluntness of it stole her breath. He looked away, toward the dark line of trees where the forest thickened. His profile was etched in shadow and faint light, all harsh angles and weary strength. "I have failed too many under my protection," he said quietly. "I will not add your name to that list." The words startled her, not their content, but their softness. Under the iron and command, there was a thread of raw sincerity she had not expected from the Wolf Duke of Varynmoor. She thought of her little cottage, its crooked beams and smoky hearth, of Bram the spider and the herbs hanging from the rafters, of the village woman who had pushed a loaf of bread into her hands with tears in her eyes after her son's fever broke, of the black smoke pillars she had seen on the horizon, rising where witches had once stood. She thought of burning. Fear, icy and choking, rose sharp in her throat. The ether under her ribs stirred, tasting her panic, eager to flare. She clenched her hands, forcing her breathing slow. In, 2, 3. Out, 2, 3. The magic eased. "If I say no," she said at last, "what happens?" His jaw tightened. "Then I escort you to the nearest border and pray you can run faster than their hounds. In other words, I die, eventually." "In other words," he said, "your odds are poor." The silence stretched between them, filled with the hush of the stream and the far-off rustle of leaves. The moon peered through a ragged gap in the clouds, casting a faint silver wash over the clearing. It made his eyes flash like embers. Marriage. The word felt too big in her mouth, too final. She had never planned for such things. Witches did not make good wives. Their lives were too precarious. She had assumed, perhaps, that her future held only herbs and lonely nights and the occasional stolen conversation with a grateful villager. Not this. Never this. Yet here it stood, in front of her, wrapped in an impossible promise. Safety, of a sort, and a chain of another kind. Would it be real? She asked finally, barely audible. This marriage? He considered her. In law, yes. In practice, he let the words trail off into the cold air, then chose them with care. "I will not demand anything of you you do not freely give, Sera Wynverra. Not your body, not your magic, not your obedience." It was a startling pledge, voiced by a man who could have simply commanded. Sera blinked. "You would make this a pretense?" she said slowly. "A public illusion of marriage to shield me, while in private we find a way to coexist without choking on ceremony," he finished, a wry note entering his tone. "Yes, I have no desire to force you into my bed or my council chamber. The life debt demands that I protect you, not that we play at happily ever after." Somehow, that should have made her feel better. Somehow, it did not, because beneath his carefully measured words, her magic, fickle traitor that it was, pulsed with a tiny flicker of something not quite fear and not quite curiosity. The memory of those strange, fleeting visions when his eyes met hers, the balcony, the wind, the sensation of wearing a mantle too heavy for one person, lingered like phantom touch. "Pretend, then," she said, almost to herself. "We would pretend." He inclined his head. "If that eases your mind." She let out a thin breath. There was no easing her mind, only choosing where to place the weight of it. "Will it also shield you?" she asked. "From the hunters?" His mouth twisted. "It will make it harder for them to move against me without publicly defying the laws they claim to uphold."
"A duke's wife, witch or no, cannot be dragged to the pyres without scandal. And if they cannot take you, their leverage over me lessens." "You think they hunt you to get to others?" she said, realizing. "I think," he said quietly, "that the king uses more than one kind of chain to bind his nobles. My curse is one. Fear is another." "Your curse," she echoed. Something flickered in his eyes, like the memory of old pain. "That is a long tale, and the night is already too short. Suffice it to say, the hunters knew where to aim." He touched the linen rune at his shoulder, fingers brushing the edge where her ink had smudged. His expression shifted, something almost like awe crossing it. "You did well," he said. "I have known trained mages who could not have drawn out that poison without killing their patient." "I almost did," she admitted, surprised into honesty. "Kill you, I mean. The aether nearly slipped." "But it did not?" "No," she said, "it did not." A sliver of pride slid through her fear, unwelcome but real. Her magic frightened her, always, but tonight, for once, it had done exactly what she had begged of it. Kael extended his uninjured arm toward her, palm open. It was not a demand, but an offering. "I cannot compel your consent," he said. "The life debt gives me the right to offer you protection. It does not give me the right to strip you of choice. If you take my hand, Sera Wynverra, we will seal this with words and walk out of this forest under the same name. If you do not, I will still do what I can to shield you, though it will not be enough." His hand was larger than hers, fingers calloused, faint scars catching what little light there was. The gesture was simple. The consequences were not. Sera stared at it, her thoughts racing in useless circles, until finally, exhausted, they slowed. Her entire life she had tried to stay small, to tuck herself into the cracks of the world where no one important bothered to look. Yet the world, it seemed, had noticed anyway. Perhaps that was what happened when you worked with a force as bright and stubborn as aether. It refused to be neatly contained. It seeped into cracks, lit dark corners. It drew eyes. The hunters would come whether she stood alone or not. If she took his hand, the danger would not vanish. It would shift shape. The court would be its own kind of peril. Politics, expectations, the sharp edges of noble intrigue. She would be a hedge-witch in ducal silks, a woman who talked to plants, sitting beside men who talked to kings. Absurd, she thought again, and almost laughed. But she would be alive. "I do not know how to be a duchess," she said, her voice very small in the big, dark forest. "Neither do I," Kael said. "We will muddle through together." The honesty of it disarmed her more than flattery could have. No promises of gilded halls or easy days. Slowly, as if both of them were, in their own ways, out of their depth. Slowly, as if her arm belonged to someone else, Sera reached out. Her fingers brushed his palm. A prickle of warmth leapt between them, a faint echo of the wild, dangerous energy she had felt when healing him, but tempered now. Less storm, more ember. He closed his hand gently around hers. "Sera Wynverra," he said, the forest listening, the aether under her skin singing like a plucked string. "Do you accept the life-debt bond and the shelter of my house in the sight of fang, blood, and stone?" She swallowed. The words that wanted to come out were, "I am afraid." What emerged instead was, "I do." The moment the word left her mouth, the air thickened. The faint shimmer around his hand flared, enveloping their joined fingers in a silvery glow. It pulsed twice, then seeped into their skin. Sera gasped softly. For a heartbeat, she felt his presence in a way that had nothing to do with sight or sound. A sense of weight and will, of fierce protectiveness and tightly caged fury. A man built of walls and teeth and the constant, grinding effort of holding something back. He must have felt something too, because his brows drew together, golden eyes widening a fraction. Then it was gone, leaving behind only the echo of contact and the faint scent of pine. "Done," he said quietly. Sera stared at their hands. They looked ordinary now. Her pale fingers, ink-stained and herb-roughened. His, darker, scarred, steady. "That's all?" she whispered. "For the vow," he said. "The rest will come." "Right," she said faintly. "The rest." He released her hand with obvious reluctance, as if aware that the gesture might spook her. He glanced at the stream, then at the sky, where the clouds had begun to thin around the moon. "We must move," he said. "Dawn will bring patrols. My estate is half a night's ride from here, and I would rather not be seen in this state by every farmer between here and the mountains." She finally remembered that he was still shirtless and damp, the chill clinging to his skin. Her healer instincts yelped again. "You will catch your death of cold," she muttered. "Considering how near I came to a far more violent death, I will take the cold." She sighed, tugged at the ties of her cloak, and swung it off her shoulders. "Here, take this." His brows rose. "You will freeze." "I am not the one who nearly died," she said, "and I will keep moving. That will warm me." He hesitated, then accepted the cloak with a nod that felt more than simple thanks. He swung it around his shoulders, the deep blue wool hanging a little short on his taller frame, but covering the worst of him. Sera hugged her arms around herself, teeth already worrying at the inside of her cheek as the night air bit through her thin dress. "Do you have a horse nearby?" she asked. "I left him tethered on the ridge when I followed the hunters," Kael said. "If he has any sense, he will still be there. And if he does not, then we walk fast." He took a step, then paused, looking back at her. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features, an almost boyish hesitation that sat strangely on his stern face. "Sera," he said, "I know this is more than you asked for." "That is one way to phrase it," she said. His mouth curved, just a fraction. Then he sobered. "But I give you my word," he said, "that whatever we must pretend in front of others, you will always have a choice in private. If at any point you wish to renegotiate the terms of this arrangement, we will. I am not in the habit of keeping unwilling prisoners." "Just unwilling wives," she said, before she could stop herself. His eyes flashed with something that might have been rueful amusement. "Let us try for unwilling accomplices instead.
A laugh bubbled up in her chest, surprising both of them. It came out small but real, fogging the air between them for an instant. "Very well, Your Grace," she said. "Accomplice it is." "Kael," he corrected. She blinked. "What?" "If we are to stand before a priest at dawn and a court by dusk," he said, "you had best get used to saying my name without a title." Her cheeks warmed again. "Kael," she repeated, and tried not to notice how the syllable sat in her mouth like something that might, eventually, become familiar. He nodded, a small, satisfied dip of his head. Then he turned toward the trees. "Come," he said, "let us get my accomplice out of this forest before the hunters realize just how badly they missed their mark." Sera drew one last breath of the damp, herb-scented air of the stream. Her old world, measured in baskets of willow bark and the creak of cottage rafters, seemed to linger in it like a ghost. Then she stepped after him, into the deeper dark between the trees, toward a future she had never imagined, and a man she had sworn, in her more cynical moments, only ever to know as a name. The night closed around them, the forest watching. And far behind, on some distant road, a band of witch-hunters turned their horses toward the faint, wild flicker of aether that had already moved on. Wind knifed through the courtyard arches of Ardynorr Keep, carrying with it the scent of pine, cold stone, and distant snow. Sera Wynverra stood just inside the gate, cloakless and trembling, though whether from the ride or the stairs she couldn't say. Guards lined the walls, silent, unreadable, hands resting on their hilts as if danger might spring from the folds of her skirt. Kael dismounted with the ease of a man accustomed to long nights and harder battles. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable in the half-light before dawn.
"Stay close," he murmured. "I am hardly likely to wander off," she whispered back, though she wasn't entirely sure. The keep loomed ahead like a mountain of stone, ancient and solemn, its spires knifing the pale sky. She'd imagined noble halls before, but none like this, dark, imposing, and strangely watchful. Kael rested a steadying hand against the small of her back. The touch was light, more guidance than claim, but heat rose beneath her skin anyway. They crossed the courtyard together. The doors opened before them, pulled aside by two servants whose eyes widened at the sight of their duke returning battered, and with an unknown woman at his side. Inside, torches burned low. The grand entry hall stretched vast and echoing, its banners heavy with dust. A wolf carved in stone dominated the far wall, its eyes set with amber that glimmered faintly in the torchlight. Footsteps echoed from above. A figure descended the staircase with elegant precision, tall, composed, wrapped in a deep burgundy gown. Her hair was ink-dark and braided with silver clasps. Lady Elowyn Strake, Kael's advisor, and, if the rumors in the village taverns were true, the only person in Varynmoor who could tell the Duke no. Her gaze swept Sera like a blade, quick and cutting. "Your Grace," she said to Kael, voice smooth, "you return at last. We were told you would not be back until midday." "It is earlier than planned," Kael said. Her attention flicked again to Sera. "So I see." Sera resisted the sudden urge to hide behind Kael like a child behind a parent's cloak. Instead, she straightened her spine, though her hands wanted to curl into fists. Elowyn stopped a step above them, giving her the advantage of height. "Your Grace, who is this?" Kael's answer came without hesitation. "Sera Wynverra, my wife." The word echoed through the hall like a shout. Sera felt, absurdly, as if she'd been struck. Even knowing the vow had been cast, hearing it aloud, solid, real, made her throat tighten. Elowyn blinked once, then again. "Your wife?" "Wife," he affirmed. A silence stretched long enough for Sera to count her heartbeats. 8, 9, 10, before Elowyn's eyes narrowed slightly. You left at dusk to investigate trespassing hunters, her tone cooled, and returned before dawn with a wife. It was an unexpected development, Kael said. I see. Elowyn looked anything but convinced. And is Lady Wynverra's sudden elevation a matter for celebration or crisis response? Kael exhaled. Later, Elowyn. For now, I need my wound tended, and Sera needs rest. Elowyn's gaze snapped to Sera's hand, where dried blood still lined her nails from the healing. You treated him? Yes, Sera said quietly. He might have died if I had not. Elowyn stared at her for a long, assessing moment, not hostile, but piercing.
As though she could peel back Sera's mind to catalogue every weakness. Follow me, she said crisply. We'll have chambers prepared. Sera opened her mouth, to protest, to explain, she wasn't sure, but Kael touched her arm lightly. I will join you shortly, he said. Go with Elowyn. There was something in his gaze, steady, reassuring, that steadied her own trembling breath. Very well. Elowyn led Sera through winding corridors lit by small lamps. Servants watched silently from doorways as they passed. Some whispered. Some stared openly at Sera's ink-stained fingers. A few touched fingers to their foreheads, a sign of warding. Sera kept her eyes forward. When they reached a chamber near the east tower, Elowyn opened the door and gestured Sera inside. The room was spacious, far beyond anything Sera had ever lived in. High windows, a carved wardrobe, a bed big enough for 3. Sera paused at the threshold. Is this? The Duchess's chambers, Elowyn said evenly. Oh, Sera whispered. Elowyn stepped in after her, shutting the door softly. The sudden privacy did nothing to calm the tension between them. You healed him, Elowyn said without preamble. Saved him. Sera nodded. Yes. Why? It was such an unexpected question that Sera blinked. He was dying. Many things die in the forest, Elowyn said. Yet you chose him. Sera felt a flicker of irritation cut through the fear. I choose anyone who needs help. Magic is not meant to be hoarded. Elowyn considered this, her expression unreadable. And your marriage? Was that also an act of charity? Heat rushed into Sera's face. No, it was necessary. Your Duke explained the danger I am in. Our Duke corrected. And yes, he would have assumed responsibility. It is in his nature to do so. She hesitated. Then, softly, You should understand something, Sera Wynverra. Kael carries many burdens. His curse alone would break a lesser man. Sera's throat tightened. I know more of it than you think. Perhaps, Elowyn said, but knowing of a wound is not the same as tending it. Sera looked down, fingers knotting in her skirt. I never asked to be part of this. Few who end up in Kael Ardynor's orbit ever do, Elowyn murmured. Before Sera could respond, a soft knock sounded behind them. Kael entered without waiting for acknowledgement. His arm freshly bound in clean linen, a dark shirt pulled carefully over his injured shoulder. His gaze went first to Sera. Are you well? He asked. Her breath caught. Mostly. He nodded, satisfied, then turned to Elowyn. We will need the priest before midday. Elowyn's mouth tightened. I will arrange it. She moved to go, but paused at the door.
And Kael? Yes. Try to avoid further surprises before then, he huffed, something like amusement crossing his features. No promises. Elowyn left. Sera exhaled shakily. She does not like me. She does not yet know you, he corrected. That is a kind interpretation. Accurate, Kael said simply. She dropped her gaze to her hands. This place, your world, it is too large for me. You have not seen it yet, he said. Only its walls. That is enough. Kael stepped nearer, careful not to crowd her. Sera, if you regret taking my hand last night. I do not, she said at once, then winced. I mean,
I am overwhelmed, but I do not regret staying alive. A faint smile touched his mouth. Good. Something in the quiet between them softened. This was still strange, still frightening, but in this moment Kael's presence felt less like a mountain and more like a fire. Dangerous, yes, but warm if one kept the right distance. Sit, he said gently. You're shaking. She hesitated, but her legs felt like twigs, so she perched on the edge of the huge bed. Kael remained standing, though a grimace flickered across his face as his shoulder pulled. Your wound, she said. You shouldn't be up. I have endured worse. That is not the compliment you think it is, she muttered, then flushed when he chuckled. A knock sounded again, brisk, commanding. Captain Rowan Vale entered, helm under his arm. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on Sera with measured scrutiny. Your Grace, we found tracks near the eastern ridge, hunters' horses. They doubled back toward the river, then crossed west. They're searching for her, Kael said. Rowan nodded. They know a witch used magic last night. The trail is faint, but enough. Sera's stomach clenched. Will they come here? Not openly, the captain said, but they will sniff for weakness. Kael's voice hardened. They will find none. Rowan dipped his head, then turned to Sera with surprising courtesy. My lady, if danger approaches, you will be under the guard of my most trusted men. Sera blinked. Thank you. When he left, silence settled again. Kael stepped closer, his voice low. You will be safe here. You say that as though you can guarantee it. I can. She looked up, searching his face. Why? Because of the vow? His jaw tightened just slightly. Partly. But even without it, I would not abandon someone who saved my life. Sera swallowed. And what will you expect of me here? Nothing you do not freely offer. Her pulse fluttered, too quick. And publicly? A united front, he said. My people will not accept you easily. They will watch, they will whisper, but they will not dare disrespect you if I give them no room to do so. She wasn't sure whether that comforted or terrified her. He extended his hand, not to bind, not to promise, simply to help her rise if she wished. Sera, he said softly, I know this place feels heavy, but you do not walk it alone. She closed her eyes briefly. Then she placed her hand in his. Just as she did, the doors flew open again. A breathless servant bowed low. Your Grace, the priest is here earlier than expected. Kael straightened, expression sharpening. Then we proceed. Sera's fingers tightened around his before she could stop them. He did not pull away. They walked together toward the door, and Sera could not shake the tremor in her heart. Not just fear now, but something gentler, warmer, impossible not to feel whenever Kael held her hand just a little longer than necessary. The bells of Ardynorr were not meant for weddings. Sera learned this on the morning she became a duchess, when their somber toll rolled through mist and stone like the sound of distant thunder. No bright peals, no fluttering ribbons, just low, steady notes that seemed to mark something weighty and irreversible. The ceremony itself was mercifully brief. A tired priest from the village chapel, eyes wide at standing between the Wolf Duke and his unknown bride, mumbled the rites with extra care to avoid misspeaking. Kael stood beside Sera, his presence a wall of quiet steadiness. His hand, when he took hers, was warm and calloused and very real. Do you bind your fates? The priest intoned. By will and word, in sight of earth and sky. I do, Kael said. Sera had to swallow twice before her voice would work. I do.
The vow she had felt in the forest flared again, a faint, silvery tightening around her ribs and palm. Not suffocating, just a reminder. When the priest finally pronounced them bound, the small crowd that had gathered, Elowyn, Roran, a handful of senior staff, bowed stiffly. No cheers, no smiles. Only wary curiosity, fixed on Sera like moths around a lantern. Later, alone for the first time all day, she sat on the edge of the vast bed in the Duchess's chambers and stared at her own hands. The same ink stains, the same faint herb scars, a simple silver band on her finger now, wolf heads etched around it, teeth nearly touching. There was a knock. "Come in," she called, hoping her voice didn't sound as frayed as she felt. The door opened. Kael stepped inside, closing it behind him with quiet care. He had changed into a fresh, dark tunic, his injured shoulder bound more neatly now. Someone had combed his hair back from his face, but a few strands had escaped, falling forward over his brow again. He looked tired, older than he had in the forest. It struck Sera that for all her panic about being thrust into his world had been forced to shift around her, too. "You're pale," he said softly. "I worried you might faint during the vows." "I considered it," she admitted, "but then I realized I might fall on the priest and cause a scandal." Something that was almost a smile touched his mouth. "The priest will survive the disappointment of an uneventful ceremony." Her gaze slid past him, toward the door. "And your people? Will they survive the shock of a hedge-witch on the ducal dais?" "They will adapt," he said, "or find employment elsewhere." She snorted before she could stop herself. "I doubt it is that simple." "No," he conceded, "it rarely is. But they have endured me all these years. You are a gentler challenge." Her face warmed. She shifted against the bedpost, suddenly aware of how alone they were, husband and wife. The words sat awkwardly beside the reality of the careful distance between their bodies. "About this arrangement," she began. His expression sobered. "Yes." "I know what you said," she hurried on, "about choice, about pretense. I appreciate that, truly. But I do not know what you expect this to look like, day to day." "For now," he said slowly, "I expect you to eat, sleep, and not vanish into the forest." "That seems a low bar." "We can raise it once you have stopped flinching every time someone calls you my lady." "I do not flinch," she protested. "You do." His eyes warmed. "It is very slight. Only those who have spent too long watching people lie notice it." Her cheeks burned. "You are infuriating." "So I have been told." He hesitated, then stepped closer, stopping an arm's length away. "Sera, I meant what I said in the forest. This bond protects you. It ties you to my house. It does not obligate you to anything you do not wish to give." She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath until it left her in a slow rush. "Then, for now, we are simply two people sharing a wall and a name." He inclined his head. "If that is how you wish to see it." She did, and didn't. There was a strange ache in her chest, as though some part of her had expected that vow glow between them to come with clarity, with a neat arrangement of feelings. Instead, all she had was confusion, fear, a flicker of reluctant fascination whenever Kael looked at her with those golden eyes. "I can abide that," she said, more briskly than she felt, "though I make no promises about names. Your Grace will slip out when I'm startled." "We will work on it," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting again. Work on it they did. The days that followed threaded themselves into a rhythm sharper than anything Sera had ever known. Mornings filled with lessons, Elowyn instructing her in titles and precedents, in which nobles bore grudges and which servants were not to be trusted with gossip. Afternoons spent in the solar, learning to sign ledgers and listen as petitioners brought their grievances. "You are good at that," Kael remarked one evening after a farmer left, cheeks flushed from gratitude. "Being confused?" Sera asked. "Listening," he corrected. "You ask the right questions. You make them feel heard." "That is not a duchess skill," she said. "It is a healer's habit." "Then it is a habit that serves both roles," he said. Not everyone agreed. At dinners in the hall, formal at first, then gradually more bearable, Sera could feel the weight of every glance. Some curious, some calculating, some openly skeptical. "The Duchess," she overheard one merchant murmur, hands still stained with ink, like a common scribe. "Better ink than blood," his companion muttered back. She pretended not to hear, but the words lodged sharp under her ribs. Kael, however, heard everything. She saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes cooled when he turned toward the offending table. No one repeated the remark within earshot again. In the quieter hours, Sera found refuge where she always had, among plants. The castle garden sprawled along the sheltered inner walls, their paths winding between beds of winter-hardy herbs and low shrubs. It was there, kneeling in the cold soil with her skirts hitched ungracefully, that Elowyn found her one afternoon. "Your Grace," Elowyn said. Sera jumped, jolting her hand against a thorn. "Ow!" Elowyn stepped forward swiftly, catching Sera's wrist before she could yank it away. "Let me see." "It's nothing," Sera protested. "Just a scratch." "A scratch on a duchess becomes a rumor of assassination," Elowyn said dryly. She inspected the small bead of blood, then glanced at the herbs Sera had been tending. Frost bloom. "In this season?" "With the right wards, yes," Sera said, a little defensively. "Its petals soothe fever when steeped. I thought it might be useful if we have another outbreak of black lung." Elowyn's expression softened, just a fraction. "You do not know how to sit idle, do you?" "I never learned," Sera admitted. "Too much aether under my skin. It needs somewhere to go." Elowyn released her wrist, stepping back. "You are not what I expected." "I'm not sure I am what anyone expected," Sera said ruefully. Elowyn studied her a long moment, then said, "Kael laughs more around you." Sera blinked. "He barely laughs at all." "Precisely my point." Before Sera could think of a reply, a horn sounded from the outer walls. A single low note of arrival, not attack. Elowyn stiffened. "We have visitors," she said. "I will see who dares ride unannounced." "Should I?" Sera gestured vaguely toward the keep. "Come," Elowyn said. "You are the Duchess. You stand beside Kael when emissaries arrive, whether they like it or not." They returned to the great hall to find Kael already at the top of the steps leading down to the courtyard, Roran at his side. Sera took her place one step below, acutely conscious of the eyes on her. The gates opened. A small company rode in, 4 mounted men and a 5th leading a pack-horse. Their cloaks bore the king's crimson sigil, bright against the gray of the morning. At their head rode a man Sera didn't recognize, his dark hair tied back, his features clean-shaven and sharp. His gaze swept the courtyard once, cataloguing everything. When his eyes landed on Sera, they lingered. "Duke Ardynorr," he called as he dismounted. His voice carried clearly. "An honor at last." Kael's face had settled into its public mask, cool, impassive. "Captain Varric Halden, is it not, the king's newest instrument?" A flicker of something moved in the captain's eyes before he bowed. "His Majesty sends his regards, and his assurances that the Witch-Hunter Corps serves only the peace of the realm." "Of course," Kael said blandly. "Peace smells very much like smoke these days." Varric's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Necessary measures. Witches have grown bold under the old king's lax rule. We cannot allow aether to run unchecked." His gaze slid to Sera again, almost lazily.
And this must be the new Duchess. Congratulations on your union, Your Grace. I confess I had not heard of a betrothal. It was recent, Kael said. So I gathered, Varric murmured. May I present my compliments? Every instinct in Sera screamed to step back. But duchesses, she suspected, did not flinch from courtesies. She inclined her head instead. Captain Haldon, she said, welcome to Ardynorr. You are gracious, my lady. He straightened, eyes narrowing just a fraction as he took in her hands, the faint ink still under her nails. Tell me, how are you finding our northern air? Some find it bracing. I grew up with similar winds, she said, forcing her voice steady. It suits me. Good. His smile sharpened. I should hate to see you fall ill so soon after your wedding. I hear healers are, unfortunate, in short supply these days. She met his gaze fully then, letting some of her irritation leak into her own stare. When they are all burned, that does tend to be the case. A few of the guards shifted, glancing between them. Varric's smile cooled. Blunt, Your Grace, he said. Accurate, she replied. Kael's voice slid between them, smooth as a blade. Captain Haldon, I assume you did not ride all this way to trade philosophies with my wife. Of course not, Varric said. We track a dangerous witch in these parts, one who used forbidden magic in the forest 2 nights past. I am here to ensure she is encouraged to face royal judgment. Sera's muscles turned to ice. Kael didn't move. You believe a witch would come within reach of my walls and not be noticed? It would not be the first time magic slithered where men did not see it, Varric said. Still, a brief search of the surrounding lands will suffice. I would not dream of questioning your vigilance within your own keep. You will not search my lands without my leave, Kael said quietly, and you do not have it. Varric's jaw tightened. Do you defy the king's command? I deny your assumption that a witch will be found where there is none, Kael said. My people are loyal. If there were a danger within my borders, I would handle it. For a tense moment, the air seemed to crackle between them. Sera's heart thudded against her ribs. If Varric pressed, if he insisted on quartering his men nearby, on sniffing through cottages and barns, on questioning villagers who might recall a hedge-witch curing a miller's son. But Varric only inclined his head, though his eyes were flat. Very well, Your Grace. I would not wish to strain hospitality. We will set up camp beyond your outer fields, then. A mere formality. Of course, Kael said. Roran will see that you do not get lost. Roran's expression suggested he wouldn't mind if they did. When the hunters finally rode out, trailing their king's colors and unspoken threats, Sera exhaled slowly. He knows, she whispered later, as she and Kael walked the inner corridor toward the solar. Elowen, sensing the need for privacy, had slipped away on some invented errand. Suspects, Kael corrected. He would have been more direct if he knew. It's only a matter of time, she said. Their senses, the way they track Aether. We will complicate his path. Kael's voice was calm, but tight around the edges. Varric is not the first hound the crown has sent to sniff at my door. He will not be the last. So long as you remain within these walls, under my name, he cannot touch you. Unless he exposes your curse, she said. He stopped walking. For a moment, only their breathing filled the corridor. How do you know it is the curse he seeks? He asked very quietly. Because you think it, she said, equally soft. I may not hear your thoughts, Kael, but I see your fear, the way you stiffen when anyone mentions the king. His mouth pressed into a line. Perceptive witch. I'm trying to learn, she said. If I am to stand beside you, I would like to know what shadows stand behind you.
shadows like the ones that visited him at night. The first time Sera heard the wolf, she woke in utter darkness, heart pounding as a low, guttural sound rolled through the keep stones. Not the howl of a wild creature, but something held back, bitten down. She followed it through the corridors, guided by instinct and that faint tug of the life-debt bond. It led her to a heavy iron-bound door at the end of a little-used hall. She pressed her palm to it, feeling cold seep into her skin. "Kael," she whispered. Silence. Then a harsh intake of breath from the other side. "Go back to your chambers, Sera," came his voice, rougher than she'd ever heard it. "What is this place?" she asked. "My precautions," he said. "When the moon rises, the curse presses harder. The wolf wants out. This room is warded against my shifting, against me." She flattened her hand more firmly. "You lock yourself in a cage?" "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes," he said. "It is safer that way." "For whom?" she asked. "You or everyone else?" "Sera." The word came out as a growl. "I will not risk tearing out the throat of the woman I swore to protect. I will not." He cut off with a sound that was half snarl, half strangled word. Her heart cracked at the edges. "Kael," she said quietly, "I can help." "You cannot," he bit out. "No one can. The last mage who tried nearly died. The king's curse is not some fever to be sweated out with herbs and willpower. It is a collar, a chain. And yet you persist in throwing yourself against it alone," she said. "That is not persist. That is stubborn self-destruction. I have managed it this long." "Managed," she repeated. "Is that what you call this?" Her fingers curled against the door. "You think I do not know what it is to fear the thing inside yourself, to cage it, to pretend that is control?" Silence, heavy, considering. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. "You see your magic as a thing to be feared." "Yes," she said simply, "because when I lose control, people get hurt." "Then we are alike," he said. Another low sound rumbled through the wood, but this time she thought she heard not fury, but exhausted grief. "If we are alike," she asked, "why must we face it alone?" "Because if I lose control with you near, the wolf will not distinguish between bond or no," he said. "It will see only threat and blood. I would—" His voice broke off. "I have already lost too much." In the quiet that followed, Sera pressed her forehead against the cold door. "Let me study it," she whispered. "Your curse, the runes, the pattern, at least allow me that." "You will find nothing new," he said, but there was less iron in his protest now, and more worn resignation. The king's mages ensured their work could not be easily untangled. "Easily," she echoed. "Not impossibly," he didn't answer. Yet the next day she found a leather-bound journal on the table in the solar. Its pages were filled with rough sketches in Kael's hand, sigils, fragments of binding circles, notes about the nights when the curse had been stronger or weaker. She traced one of the drawn runes with a fingertip, the careful ink lines steady despite the rage they must have represented. "This is a king's mark," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. Elowen, arranging scrolls nearby, glanced up. "What did you say?" "Here." Sera turned the journal, pointing to a particular sigil, a stylized crown intertwined with a jagged, twisted loop. "I have seen this before, on a decree posted in the village. It is the king's seal, modified with spellwork, a binding crest." Elowen's face paled. "You are certain?" "Yes." Sera's pulse quickened. This was no accident, no wild curse or old forest magic. The king did this to him. Elowyn's hands tightened around a scroll she held. "We suspected. We could never prove." "He made it so Kael's anger feeds the curse," Sera said slowly, orders of runes connecting in her mind like teeth in a jaw. "The more he resists, the stronger it grows. The more he struggles, the heavier the chain." "And you think you can break something wrought by the king's personal mages?" Elowyn's voice was edged, but not mocking, more like she was bracing for disappointment. "I think," Sera said, "that all magic has a cost. If I can understand what price was paid to forge this, I might find where it can be unbound." "You would risk it?" Elowyn said. "Risk him? Yourself?" "Yes," Sera said without hesitation. Elowyn looked at her a long moment, then nodded once. "Then you had best tell him what you found, before he stumbles over it alone and does something foolish." Sera found Kael in the training yard, watching Roran drill the guards. His wounded shoulder limited his movements, but not his gaze. It missed nothing, tracking each swing, each misstep. When he noticed her, a faint tension eased around his eyes. "Escaping Elowyn's lectures?" he asked. "I braved them this morning," she said. "I have earned a respite." "How many forks now reside on your place setting?" he teased. "Too many," she said. "No sane person needs 3 for a single meal." His mouth curved. "Do not let Elowyn hear you say that." "I think she suspects my barbarism," Sera said. "But that is not why I came." He sobered, turning fully toward her. "Go on." She held up the journal. "This mark," she said, tapping the king's crest. "It is the key." He went very still. "I have mapped what I can," she continued, "the way the curse flares when you are angry, the way it steadies when you are calmer." "Calmer is generous," he muttered. "Less furious, then," she amended. "It is tied to emotion, like all ether. But there is a second thread, something that pulls from outside you. I think the king built a tether into the spell, a way to tighten it at will." His jaw clenched. "I felt it when I refused his last summons. The wolf pressed harder that night. I thought it coincidence." "It was not," Sera said. "The sigil here," she pointed to a jagged line crossing the crest, "is a controlling switch. If we can, blunt if edge, you might reclaim more of yourself." "If," he echoed. "I cannot promise," she said. "It would be like cutting a collar without slicing the throat beneath. Precise work, dangerous." "And you would volunteer to stand in the circle with me while you do it," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a long time. The sounds of the training yard faded. The thud of boots, the clack of wooden practice swords became distant. "This curse was laid by men who have spent their lives twisting ether to chain others. You have spent yours trying to heal. Do not throw that away because you think my anguish deserves heroics. I am not doing this for heroics," she said, stung. "I am doing it because I am tired of hearing you tear yourself apart behind a locked door, because I see what it does to you, because," she broke off, breath catching, "because I care about you." The words clawed at her throat, too soon, too raw. "Because," she amended hoarsely, "I owe you more than standing on a balcony while you go to war with yourself every night." His eyes softened. "You owe me nothing. Tell that to the vow," she said. "It does not agree." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "The vow was meant to protect you, not give you reasons to fling yourself at my curses." "Perhaps it did both," she said quietly. He dragged a hand through his hair, exhaling. "If we attempt this, it will not be tonight. I need time to prepare wards, and you will need to rest. You—" His gaze raked her face. "Thin." "I am eating," she protested. "Your cooks are alarmingly generous. With food, yes. With rest, less so." He closed the journal gently. "When we try, it will be in the safest room I have. And if, at any point, I sense the wolf gaining ground, I end it. Understood?" "Understood," she said. "And Sera," he added, voice low, "you do not stay if it turns ugly. You run. You let Elowyn seal the room. You do not try to be a martyr." She swallowed. "Agreed." He searched her face, then nodded once. "Very well. We'll attempt your madness." She smiled, shaky but real. Thank you. The days that followed were strained, expectant. Sera spent hours in the library, poring over old texts Elowen smuggled to her, searching for mentions of king-bound curses and ways they had splintered. She sketched circles in charcoal, muttering under her breath, testing small patterns on stones and herbs. The bond between her and Kael hummed more insistently now, a faint awareness that brushed against her at odd moments, when he entered a room before she saw him, when his temper flared, when he laughed. It was like being aware of a storm on the horizon, even on a clear day. One evening, as she worked alone in the solar, he arrived carrying a small ironwood box. "What's that?" she asked, setting her chalk aside. "A precaution," he said. He opened it, revealing a faintly glowing crystal nestled in padded cloth. It pulsed in time with a heartbeat that was not hers. A aether anchor, she realized. Rare. "Cost me half a mountain and the patience I didn't have to bargain with the dwarves," he said. "If the curse surges, it will draw some of the backlash into itself." "And if it shatters?" she asked. "Then we know it was working," he said dryly. "Not comforting. I deal in reality, not comfort. So I've noticed." When at last the moon swelled full and heavy in the sky, they met in the warded chamber at the end of the quiet hall. It was larger than she'd imagined, circular, its stone walls inscribed with old runes darkened by age. Chains hung from hooks, unused, she realized, a last resort Kael had never embraced. "I do not bind myself," he said when he saw her looking. "I cage myself. There is a difference." She nodded, throat tight. They stood in the center of the room. She had chalked a circle around them, marked with sigils of balance and grounding. The anchor crystal sat at its edge, faintly pulsing. She could feel the curse in the air already, restless under Kael's skin, pacing like a caged thing. "Are you certain?" she asked. "No," he said, "but we are here." He removed his shirt, the motion stiff but unself-conscious. Sera tried to focus on the mark she needed to see. The twisted crown sigil burned into the skin over his heart like a brand. It glowed faintly, threads of black aether coiling from it. Her mouth went dry. "That must have hurt." "I remember little of the night it was done," he said, "only that afterward every breath felt like borrowed air." She reached out with careful fingers, hovering just above the mark. Heat radiated from it, not physical, but magical, prickling up her arm. "I'm going to lay my hand here," she said. "I need to feel the pattern. You may feel pulled or exposed." His mouth twitched. "I have been exposed before." She gave him a flat look. "This is different." He sobered. "Do it." Her palm settled over the brand. The world shifted. For a moment, she saw him not as a man standing before her, but as a lattice of threads, anger, loyalty, grief, duty, all woven through with a thicker, darker cord strangling the rest. The king's seal burned at the center, a knot tightening with every heartbeat. She slid her awareness along that cord, wincing at each jag of pain. It responded to her touch like a snake, coiling tighter, bearing metaphysical fangs. "Easy," she whispered, to herself and it both. "I'm not here to cut, just to loosen." She murmured a focusing phrase, not quite a spell, more an alignment. "By truth of breath and blood's own ring, reveal the cost of binding king." A low growl rumbled in Kael's chest. His hands clenched at his sides. "Sera," he ground out, "careful." "I see it," she said, words distant. "He rooted it in your rage. Every time you stand against him, every time you think of his injustice, it feeds. You've been nourishing your own chain." "I am aware," he bit out. "Not like this," she said. "You blame yourself, but this was designed. You were meant to feel complicit." The realization hit her with a rush of anger on his behalf. The aether under her ribs surged in response, bright and hot. The curse leapt. It lunged up the touch between her palm and his chest, seizing on the opening like a drowning man on a rope. For a heartbeat, she felt it slam into her, cold and wild and furious. She gasped, her knees buckled. Kael caught her on instinct, arms closing around her before she could fall. "Sera!" His voice sounded far away, muffled under the roar of the curse. "Let go!" She tried. Her fingers wouldn't obey. The aether raged, her own magic tangling with the curse, amplifying it. The wolf surged forward. His body convulsed, shifting in jagged, half-formed bursts, bones grinding, muscles spasming. Fur rippled under her hand, then retreated, then burst forth again. His face twisted, teeth lengthening. "Run!" he snarled, voice breaking. She dug in, both literally and metaphorically. "No. You promised," he choked. "I promised not to be a martyr," she said through gritted teeth. "Not to flee if there was still a chance. There is." She seized her magic with both hands, metaphorically, dragging it back from the precipice. Instead of pushing against the curse, she tried something else. She wrapped it. Not a blade, a bandage. Roots, she thought again, not ripping, not cutting, surrounding, smothering. Her aether flowed around the king's mark, not into it, forming a buffer between it and Kael's core. The curse thrashed, enraged, but found itself muffled. The anchor crystal flared, drawing some of the backlash into itself. Cracks spidered through it. Kael's breath came in harsh gasps. His form flickered, man, wolf, man again, each shift less jagged as the buffer held. "Sera," he rasped, "you'll burn yourself." "I have burned before," she said faintly. "You are not the only one who can endure." A laugh, disbelieving, pained, tore from him. Then the sound shifted into a raw shout as the last wave of curse energy crashed against her improvised dam. The crystal shattered. Light exploded through the room, slamming them both to their knees. Sera's vision went white, her ears ringing. She felt the curse recoil, stung, coiling tighter into its knot, but no longer flailing unchecked. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Her palm still rested over his heart. Beneath it, his skin was fever-hot. The brand's glow had dimmed, its edges less sharp, as if someone had blurred them. "Sera," he said hoarsely, "let go." She tried. This time, her fingers obeyed. Her hand slid down his chest, leaving a faint impression of warmth. She sagged back, the world tilting. He caught her shoulders, holding her upright. "You fool! You brilliant, reckless fool!" She blinked up at him. His face hovered above hers, human again, eyes amber but not glowing with feral light. His mouth was bruised where he'd bitten it, his hair a tangled mess. "Did it work?" she asked, voice barely audible. He swallowed, took a breath, another. "The noise," he said slowly. "It's quieter. The wolf is still there, but it's not pressing as hard. I can breathe." Relief crashed through her so hard it was almost pain. "Good," she murmured. "That's good." Her vision blurred around the edges. She was distantly aware of the raw ache in her limbs, the way her own aether lay limply, like a muscle pushed too far. "Sera," his voice sharpened, "stay with me." "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Floor is too comfortable." "This floor is stone," he said. "Exactly," she mumbled. He shifted, lifting her before she could protest, cradling her against his chest. The movement made his own newly taxed muscles protest, but he did not falter. "You're heavy," she muttered into his shoulder. "You're exhausted," he countered. "We are both allowed observations." The door slammed open. Elowyn and Roran burst in, eyes wild. "What happened?"
Elowyn commanded, taking in the shattered crystal, the smudged circle, the way Kael held Sera. "We survived," Kael said. "For now, that is enough." Elowyn's gaze flicked to the brand on his chest. Her lips parted. "The mark." "Blunted," Sera murmured, too tired to lift her head. "Won't bite as hard." "Torn from one of the king's own collars," Elowyn breathed. Wonder and fear warred on her face. "He will feel that." Sera's stomach dropped. "Feel." "The tether," Elowyn said. "He will know something shifted. He may not know what or how, but he will feel the slack in his leash." Kael's jaw tightened. "Let him pull. This time I will not choke." "You may not, but he will suspect someone cut at his knot," Elowyn said, "and he will look for the knife." Her gaze landed on Sera.
Sera swallowed. "I didn't cut," she protested weakly. "I padded." "The king will not care for nuance," Elowyn said. "Then we give him none," Kael said. "We do nothing that looks like rebellion. We carry on. If he calls me to court, I go as a dutiful vassal. Sera remains here, safe, under guard." Sera tensed weakly. "If he calls you, that is a storm we will face when it breaks," he said. "For now, you will rest." He started toward the door. "Kael," she whispered. He looked down at her at once. "Yes." "I felt it," she said, words fumbling. "When I touched the curse. You. The parts of you it tries to strangle. Anger, yes, but also all the places it hooked into duty, into the things you love." A series of emotions flickered across his face, too quickly for her to name. "You think I do not know that?" he asked softly. "I think," she said, "you blame yourself for feeling anything at all. I think the king knew that, and used it." Her vision blurred fully then. She remembered the strange balcony sensation she'd glimpsed in the forest, the sense of wearing a mantle too heavy for one. And for a moment she thought she stood there again, snow wind in her hair, unseen eyes below. Then the image slipped away, leaving only the steady beat of Kael's heart under her ear. "Rest," he said again, more gently. "We will argue about my feelings when you can stand on your own." "Coward," she mumbled. His laugh was quiet, incredulous. "Sleep, Sera." She let herself drift. When she woke, the light was different, softer, late afternoon perhaps. She lay in her bedchamber, the heavy duvet tucked around her. Her body ached in familiar, overused ways, as if she'd spent all day pulling weeds in hard soil. "Welcome back," came a dry voice from the chair by the fire. She turned her head. Kael sat there, one elbow on the armrest, his injured shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages. Someone had insisted on a shirt this time, but his collar lay open, the edge of the brand just visible. It looked duller, less like a fresh wound, more like an old scar. "How long?" she croaked. "Half a day," he said. "Too long," she muttered. "I had things to do." "I have informed the herbs that you will be late to lecture them," he said. They seemed understanding. She tried to smile. It came out more of a grimace. "Your attempt at humor is improving." "I have an able tutor," he said. Silence stretched between them, warmer than the one in the cursed room, but wary at the edges. "You should not have done that," he said at last. "I said I would," she replied. "I know." He looked down at his hands. "That is what frightens me." She frowned. "You would rather I lied?" "I would rather," he said, quietly, "that you valued your own safety above my chain." "I do," she said. "I simply do not value it more than your freedom." Her heart gave a small lurch. She hadn't realized she meant the next words until they fell out. "More than you." His head jerked up. Their gazes met. She saw the moment he heard what she hadn't intended to say so bluntly. The way his pupils widened, the way his breath caught. The bond between them gave a startled, bright little flutter. "Sera," he said, voice rougher. Heat rushed up her neck. "I mean,
as a duchess values her duke, as a friend, as an accomplice, as someone who has grown very weary of listening to you suffer through walls." "Of course," he said, too quickly. The air, which had been tilting toward something fragile and new, shifted. He sat back, fingers curling around the wooden armrest until his knuckles whitened. "I will not," he said carefully, "allow this bond to become another chain around your neck. I will not have you feel obligated to care." "That is not how caring works," she said. "For you," he said. "For me, it has not always been voluntary." Something in his tone made her chest ache. "Kael, if the king learns what you did today," he went on, "he will not simply tighten my leash. He will look for where it slipped. He will tug. He will see you, and he will use you to hurt me." "I am not eager to be made into a weapon," she said. "Nor am I eager to place you in his sights," he said. "So we will be more cautious." "We?" she repeated. "Yes." He rose, the chair creaking. "There will be no further experiments without my explicit consent. No risks taken because you cannot bear to hear me scream. No shared circles where the wolf can reach you." "Kael," she began. His gaze met hers then, and she stopped. There was fear in it, real fear. Not of hunters, not of curses, of himself. "I nearly tore you apart today," he said, voice low. "If you had misjudged by a breath, by a heartbeat, if that crystal had cracked sooner, the wolf would have ripped through me into you. Do you understand?" "Yes," she said softly. "I was there." "And you still?" He broke off, swallowing hard. "Whatever you feel you owe me, Sera, it is repaid, more than repaid. If you never touch the curse again, if you never lay a hand on that brand, I will not blame you." She stared at him. "Is that what you want?" "What I want," he said, "is irrelevant. What is necessary is this: distance, until Varric leaves, until the king's attention shifts elsewhere, until I am certain that whatever we did today will not draw more danger down on your head." The words landed like cold water. "Distance." "You are sending me away," she said. "Not away," he said quickly. "Just safer. I will move back to my old chambers. You will keep these. We will dine together, appear together in public, fulfill the duties the court expects. But at night, when the curse presses most, you will be nowhere near it." Her chest ached. "We share a bond now. You cannot simply lock me out of your suffering because you have decided it is tidier that way." "Tidier," he echoed, something like self-mockery in his voice. "No, not tidier, just survivable for you." She gripped the edge of the blanket. "I am not fragile." "I know," he said. "If you were, this would be easier." They stared at each other, the space between them suddenly vast despite the handful of paces. "I thought," she said slowly, "that we were beginning to trust each other." "We are," he said, "which is precisely why I will not risk you." "Trust is not protection," she said. "It is sharing the danger." "Then let me be the one to hold it," he said, "just this once." The finality in his tone told her she would not move him tonight. His fear was too raw, too newly prodded. She lay back against the pillows, exhausted beyond arguing. "You are a stubborn man, Kael Ardynorr." "So I have been told." He hesitated at the doorway, hand on the latch, then looked back at her. "Sleep, Sera," he said. "I will stand watch outside Varric's camp tonight, from a distance. If he senses weakness, he will press. I would rather be the first thing he finds." "Don't let him catch you," she said. A faint, fierce smile touched his mouth. "He won't." When he left, the room felt emptier. Not of sound, not of light, just of that subtle awareness she'd grown used to. His presence brushing against her, solid and reassuring. She turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, the moon climbed higher, veiled by thin clouds. Somewhere in the outer fields, witch hunters sat around a fire, plotting.
Somewhere along the invisible tether that still connected him to the crown, the king might have felt the brief slackening, the slight shift of control. Sera curled her fingers into the duvet, a knot forming in her chest. Distance, Kael had said, but the bond between them pulsed faintly still, no matter how far he tried to push. It whispered of exhaustion and grim resolve, and the stubborn, aching care of a man who would rather tear himself apart than risk hurting someone else. She closed her eyes. "We will not do this forever," she murmured into the quiet. "You can push me away tonight, Wolf Duke, but I will not stay on my side of the walls forever." Outside, somewhere beyond stone and fear, a wolf's low howl slid along the wind. And in the dark, Sera Wynverra lay awake, not sure which frightened her more now, the king's curse or the way her heart had begun to answer that sound like a promise. Snow came early to Varynmoor. It drifted down from a low, iron-gray sky in thin, reluctant flakes that clung to the battlements and softened the hard lines of the courtyard. Sera watched it from the solar window, fingers wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. From here, she could see the outer fields, the distant black smudge of trees, and, if she squinted, the faint line of smoke rising from the witch hunters' camp. It never went out, that fire, like a watchful eye that refused to blink. "Staring at them will not make them leave faster," Elowen remarked, laying a ledger on the table. Sera tore her gaze away. "I know. Then why do it? Because pretending they aren't there feels worse." She set her cup down, the porcelain clinking softly, like ignoring a fever and hoping it will cool on its own. Elowen's mouth twisted. A fair analogy. Unfortunately, this particular fever has a king's hand stoking it. "How long will they stay?" Sera asked. "As long as it pleases them," Elowen said, "or until they think they have squeezed all the fear and cooperation they can from the nearby villages." Sera's stomach tightened. "They've begun questioning villagers?" "Yes." Elowen opened the ledger, though her gaze remained distant. "Rumors reached us this morning. Varek sent 2 of his men to the miller's hamlet, asking after unusual healings, witches who cured what should have killed." Cold spread through Sera's limbs. "The miller's son?" "Likely," Elowen said. "We have sent word to keep tongues careful, but gratitude loosens lips. People rarely understand which stories draw fire." Sera needed to move. Sitting here, surrounded by ink and parchment, felt suddenly suffocating. She pushed away from the window. "I'll speak with the miller," she said. "Explain the danger. If he knows what hangs over him, he might—" "You are not leaving the keep," Elowen said sharply. Sera stopped. "Elowen?" "Kael's orders," Elowen said. "You know that." She did. He had been almost maddeningly consistent with them since the night they'd blunted the curse. Appear in public beside him, smile when appropriate, speak when spoken to, and at sundown retreat behind stone and guards while he kept watch at the edges. Distance, carefully maintained. "He cannot keep me locked away forever," Sera said. "He does not intend forever, only until the hunters lose interest in your particular scent," Elowen replied dryly. "In this I find myself in rare agreement with him." "People are in danger," Sera said, "because of my magic, my presence, my existence. Sitting here pretending to learn which fork matches which course feels infuriating." "Yes," Elowen said. "Do you think I enjoy tallying grain while hunters ride through my homeland? We each play the roles we must for now." Sera bit back another protest. Elowen was right. She knew it. That did nothing to ease the restless itch under her skin, the way her aether churned without an outlet. Later, when the candles burned low and the keep quieted into its night rhythms, she slipped out of her chambers and padded down the corridor. She knew where to find him now. The hall to the warded room felt less ominous each time she walked it, though the air still held a faint metallic tang, the scent of old magic and older fear. She touched the door lightly. "Kael?" she whispered. Silence.
She waited, head resting against the cool wood. Through the thin thread of their bond, she felt him. Elsewhere in the keep tonight, not behind this door. A tug of focus, a lingering awareness. Wakeful, guarded. She turned away, frustrated. He avoided these corridors when she came now. He never said as much, but she saw the way he changed his patterns, how he made sure there was always a wall or three between them when the moon rose, as if distance itself could dull whatever risk she posed to him, or he to her. Their paths crossed in other ways. In the council room, where they argued quietly over tax remissions for villages harried by hunters. In the great hall, where their shoulders brushed when they stood to greet petitioners. In the garden, once, when he surprised her with a small cutting of frost bloom she'd thought had died. Plants thrive under stubborn hands, he'd said. You seemed well suited to them. She'd smiled then, warmth threading through her. But at night, when the curse snarled loudest, he guarded himself fiercely from her. She understood. She hated it. A knock on her chamber door pulled her from her thoughts the next morning. She opened it to find Roran, helm in hand, expression grim. "My lady," he said, "there's a man at the gate. Says his daughter is ill. He begged for the Duchess's healer's hand." Her heart skipped. "From which village?" "The miller's," Roran said. Fear and guilt tangled. Is it a trap? Varek sending bait? "If it is well disguised," Roran said. The man's hands shook so hard he could barely hand over the token that proves he pays our tithe. He knows nothing of spells, only that his child cannot breathe. "Blacklung," Sera breathed. Again. It would seem so. She didn't have to think. "I'm going." Roran's jaw tightened. "You know what the Duke ordered." "I know what a healer does when someone cannot breathe," she said. "You may tell Kael I bullied you." Roran regarded her for a beat, then exhaled slowly. "I have seen you argue with him. Bullied is not the word I would choose." He hesitated. "I will accompany you myself, with a small guard. If there is a trap, they'll have to spring it with steel in their faces." "Thank you," she said. She grabbed her satchel, already packed with herbs and sigils out of habit, and followed Roran down to the courtyard. Snow crunched underfoot, thinner here within the walls, thicker beyond. Kael was not there. Good, she thought. Bad, another part of her whispered. He would be furious. They rode hard, their breath misting in the cold. The trees thinned as they approached the hamlet, smoke rising from low thatched roofs. A few villagers watched their approach warily, eyes darting to the guard's sigils. Inside the miller's cottage, the air was thick with the sour-sweet smell of sickness. A girl of maybe 8 lay on the pallet, her small chest heaving, eyes glazed. Sera knelt immediately, the rest of the room blurring. "How long?" she asked. 2 days, the miller stammered. "We tried the herbs you gave us before, my lady, but they did nothing." She touched the girl's forehead, burning. The rattle in her lungs sounded worse than the last case she treated. The disease had teeth this time. Sera murmured calming nonsense to the child, fingers brushing damp curls back from her face. "You've done all you could," she told the father. "Let me try now." She set her satchel beside the pallet, hands moving with practiced speed, crushing dried frost bloom petals, adding a pinch of willow bark, a whisper of salt. She placed the mix under the girl's nose. The sharp scent made the child cough weakly. "Good," Sera whispered. "Keep fighting." She reached inward, for aether. It rose eagerly, as it always did, answering a call that had become more natural than breathing. She shaped it gently around the girl's lungs, imagining tight bands loosening, thick shadows thinning. "Breathe," she murmured. "In, out, slow, calm." Time blurred. When the girl's ragged breaths finally eased into something more even, Sera sagged back on her heels, sweat cooling on her neck. The miller choked on a sob. "Thank you. Gods, thank you." "Keep her warm," Sera said. "Broth only for a day. No heavy bread. If her breathing worsens, send for me at once." He nodded vigorously, tears streaming.
It wasn't until she stepped outside that the prickle at the back of her neck fully registered. Too many eyes, too much stillness. Roran stood near the cottage door, one hand on his sword hilt, gaze scanning the tree line. "We should leave," he said quietly. "Now." "Yes," Sera agreed. They walked toward the horses. Snow crunched under other feet now. Too many. Men emerged from between cottages, fishermen and farmers alike, expressions tense. For a moment, Sera thought they blamed her for bringing danger. Then she saw the way they all looked past her, toward the road. Hoofbeats. Varric Halden rode into the hamlet, flanked by 4 hunters, their black feathered arrows gleaming. His gaze, of course, found Sera first.
"Your Grace," he said, smiling like a wolf before a lamb. "What a pleasant surprise." Roran stepped between them at once. "Captain Halden, this is Ardynorr land. You have no right to harass the Duchess on a healer's call." "Harass?" Varric's brows rose. "I would never dream of it. I merely follow the scent of aether. Imagine my delight when it leads me not to some skulking crone in the woods, but to the Duke's own new bride." Sera's blood chilled. "I answered a call for aid," she said evenly. "If your men had done their jobs properly, the child would not have needed me." A murmur rippled through the villagers. Varric's smile thinned. "Bold," he said, "for someone whose fate rests on how useful she appears to the crown." Roran's hand tightened on his sword. "You will not speak threats here." "And you will not draw steel on the king's captain," Varric said softly. "We wouldn't want word to reach the capital that Ardynorr's guard turned traitor." His gaze slid back to Sera, sharp as broken glass. "Your talents are impressive, Duchess. Healing black lung is no small feat. Tell me, where did you study?" "In my teacher's cottage," she said, "before she was burned for doing exactly what I just did." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "And you thought hiding in a wolf's den would save you?" "I thought," she said, "that saving lives would be more valuable to the realm than destroying them." He laughed then, genuinely amused. "You truly don't understand, do you? Witches like you chip away at the king's order. People begin to trust you more than his laws. That cannot stand." "Enough." Roran stepped forward. "You are done here, Captain. Return to your camp." "I will," Varric said, "after I finish my work." He nodded to his men. They moved with practiced speed. Before Sera fully processed the intention in their faces, 2 hunters had swung down from their saddles, iron-threaded nets gleaming. Roran's sword flashed free. "Stand down!" Steel rang. The village erupted into chaos. Women shouting, children crying, men pulling back in fear. Sera stumbled aside as Roran clashed with the hunters, blades meeting with brutal force. One net sailed toward her. She threw up her hands instinctively, magic sparking. The net shuddered midair, slowed, but the iron threads screamed against her aether, dragging, burning. Pain flared up her arms. It hit her. The world became fire and ice. The iron tore at her magic, ripping, searing. She screamed, knees slamming into the snow as the net tightened. "Sera!" Roran roared. He cut down one hunter, but another slammed into him from behind. Roran stumbled, blood arcing across the snow. "Stop!" Sera choked, struggling against the net. The more she fought with magic, the worse the burning grew, the iron drinking her strength.
"Stop! You'll kill him!" "Yield," Varric said, "and he lives." Roran spat blood, trying to rise again. A hunter kicked him hard, sending him back to the ground. Sera froze. Every instinct screamed to burn the net away, to drag the aether thick around her like armor. But the iron felt like hooks in her veins.
One more surge, and she wasn't sure whether it would be the net that broke or her. "Yield," Varric repeated, voice softer. "Come quietly, your grace. Face judgment, or watch your captain die for your pride." She met Roran's gaze. Pain and fury warred in it, but also a raw, desperate plea. Don't. She thought of the miller's daughter inside, breathing easier now because of her. Of Kael, miles away, unaware. Of the bond between them tugging faintly already, like a string pulled too tight. Her heart pounded. "I'll come," she said, voice shaking. "Just leave him. Leave them all." Varric's smile deepened. Wise. He nodded at his men. One yanked the net's drawcord, binding it tighter around her, binding her arms to her sides. The iron bit cruelly. Her magic writhed, then shuddered. "Take the captain's sword," Varric said. "Leave him his life, for now." The hunters obeyed. Roran cursed, shoving against the hold on him, but stopped when a blade pressed to his throat. Varric swung back into his saddle, watching as his men hauled Sera upright like a captured animal. "The king will be pleased," he murmured. Then louder for the villagers. "Let it be known that the crown does not burn the innocent, only those who use forbidden power. Her trial will be fair." Lies, every syllable, Sera thought. But the villagers' faces were pinched with fear, not outrage. Fear of her, of the hunters, of losing what little protection they had if they resisted. They rode. The net bounced cruelly with each step. Sera clenched her jaw to keep from crying out. The iron cords dug into her flesh, each jolt sending little sparks of pain along her nerves. She reached, instinctively, for the bond. Kael. It pulsed faintly in answer, surprised, sharp. Then, like a storm waking, it roared. He was moving. She felt it in the way the bond tugged, in the sudden surge of focus, the way the background hum of his constant worry crystallized into something fierce and singular. "Stay," she thought desperately, not sure if the words could travel that far. "Don't do anything." Reckless. No answer. Only speed, fury, fear. Varric's men dragged her into their camp, throwing the net down near the central fire. Snow had been cleared there, revealing hard-packed earth. Iron stakes waited, ominous in their neat row. "Do not tie her yet," Varric said. "We've guests coming." He crouched beside her, studying her face as if she were some fascinating insect. "Did you truly think the Duke could hide you forever?" "I did not plan that far ahead," she rasped. "Honest," he said. "Refreshing." He leaned closer. "Tell me, Sera Wynverra, has he told you why he wears that curse? The story you woven wives tell each other in the night?" "I prefer sleep to gossip," she said. "Liar," he murmured. "Let me enlighten you then. Our dear Wolf Duke refused a command. When the king ordered him to lead the first purge of witches, he balked, said he would not slaughter healers who had saved his people in winter." Sera's breath caught. "He thought his loyalty to the north would shield him," Varric went on. "But the king prefers obedience to conscience. So he gave Kael a choice. Submit a token witch, publicly burned, or bear a more personal reminder of his place." "The curse," Sera whispered. "Very good," Varric said. "He chose to spare the witch and take the weight himself. Noble, wasn't it, all those years ago? A single woman saved in exchange for a lifetime of chains." Sera's heart thudded. "What happened to her, the witch?" "Oh, she died anyway," Varric said lightly. "Different pyre, different excuse. Men like Kael rarely understand that one act of defiance does not unravel a king's will." Anger flared hot and sharp. "Then why does he still wear the chain?" "Because it suits the king to keep it there," Varric said. "These days, every time the Duke drags his heels on a summons or protests a policy, the wolf gets a little hungrier.
keeps him humble." Sera swallowed bile. She had suspected some version of this, but hearing it laid out in cold, clinical terms made her stomach twist. "And now," Varric said, "you have blunted that leash, slipped a little soft cloth under its edge." Her blood ran cold. "You felt that?" "Oh yes," he said. "So did His Majesty. He may not know how, but he knows who. There is only one witch under this duke's roof now brave, or foolish, enough to place her hands on a king's work." Sera clenched her jaw. "Then why bother with this performance? Why not kill me in the forest and be done?" "Because," Varric said, "you are more useful alive, as leverage. The king sent me with a message, you see, woven between all the talk of dangerous witches. It is very simple. If Kael Ardynorr bows, if he comes to court and renews his oath properly, if he ceases this tiresome resistance, then perhaps his pretty duchess's fate will be reconsidered." He smiled thinly. "Men like him break faster when they know their choices hurt someone else." "You will not break him," she said. "Perhaps not," he said, "but I have broken stronger men than you." He stood, nodding to his men. "Bind her. We'll send a messenger to the keep. Give the wolf a clear choice." They lashed her to one of the iron stakes, ropes biting into her wrists and ankles. The net stayed in place, a second layer of restraint and agony. Each touch of iron against her skin sent her magic skittering back like a frightened animal. As they worked, one of the younger hunters hesitated, gaze flicking to her face. His hands shook. "Careful!" Varric snapped. "You act as if you've never bound a witch before." The boy swallowed. "She healed that child, sir. The girl was dying." "And now she isn't," Varric said. "The Duchess has had her good deed. The crown thanks her." He patted Sera's cheek mockingly. "It will be mentioned when they write the records." Firewood piled at her feet, dry, hungry. Sera's breathing quickened. She tried to steady it, but the ropes were tight and the net heavy. The memory of distant pyre smoke rose up, clawing at her lungs. No, not like this, not after everything. She closed her eyes, reaching again for the bond. "Kael, please." It answered, fierce and close now. He was near. Snow muffled the sound of hooves, but she felt the change in the camp before she heard anything, like the air pulling in a breath. The hunters sensed it too, their easy movements sharpened, hands drifting to weapons. A horn blew on the hill above the camp, 2 short bursts. A signal. Roran, Sera realized, heart lurching. He'd followed, even wounded. "Positions," Varric snapped. "Shields up. Our wolf comes." Kael rode into view between the pine trunks, black cloak snapping behind him like a shadow. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped, boots crunching in the snow. His eyes found Sera at once. For a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. Her heart stuttered. The bond between them blazed, bright and searing. She saw herself reflected in his gaze, bound, burned, and something in him snapped. "Varric," he said, voice low. "Release her." "Ah," Varric said. "There he is. I was beginning to worry you'd grown soft." Kael's jaw flexed. "You trespass on my land. You lay iron on my wife. You spill my captain's blood. Do you truly believe you will leave here intact?" "You mistake the balance of power," Varric said. "I stand with the king's law. You stand with a witch who fouls it." "The king's law was not written to excuse cruelty," Kael said, "and you use it like a knife." "Perhaps," Varric said, "but mine is the blade the crown favors." He gestured toward Sera. "You know why I'm here, Ardynorr. The king feels his leash slacken. He demands proof of your obedience. Come to court, renew your vows, submit to inspection of your lands and house, or watch her burn. The last word hung in the air like ash. Kael's breath came slow and controlled. Sera saw the war inside him, the urge to launch himself at Varric's throat, to tear, to rend, warring with the cold, calculating part that had kept him alive this long. The curse stirred under his skin. She saw it in the tightness around his eyes, the faint, unnatural gleam in his irises.
"Let her go," he said, "and I will come." Sera jerked. "Kael, no!" "Quiet," Varric said, almost pleasantly. "You will spoil the negotiation." He smiled up at Kael. "No, Your Grace, I think not. You've made too many of your own terms recently. Time you learned what it is to kneel without conditions." Kael's hand flexed at his side. The air seemed to thicken. "Careful," Varric murmured. "You know what anger does to you." Sera did too. She could feel it building, the curse coiling in him, feeding on every spike of rage. The brand on his chest would be burning now, threads tightening. "Kael," she said, forcing her voice steady, "look at me." His gaze flicked to her. For a heartbeat, the wolf receded, and she saw only the man. Furious, yes, but also terrified. "This is what he wants," she said. "You riled, half-shifted. Show them who they fear. Give the king all the excuse he needs." "And if I do nothing," he said quietly, "you die." Varric clapped slowly. A poignant summary. "Not today," Sera said. "Not like this." Her mind raced. The net pressed heavy, iron biting. But she felt something else now, under the pain, a weak, flickering thrum. Her own magic refusing to be fully smothered. It couldn't burn the iron, but perhaps it could move through it. She slowed her breathing, ignoring Varric's smug face, the gathered hunters, the pile of wood at her feet. Instead, she focused inward, on that thin, stubborn thread of aether. Not fire, she thought, not force. She pictured it as water instead, seeping, patient. Where iron blocked, it flowed around, slipping through gaps too small for hooks. She followed it with her awareness, tracing the net's pattern, the rope's knot lines, not to break them, to find the spaces between. "Sera," Kael said warningly, feeling the shift. "Trust me," she whispered. She reached along the bond then, twining her magic with that connection. It hummed, eager, answering. The distance between them, physical, magical, all of it, compressed. She felt his heartbeat like an echo of her own. "Captain Halden," she said, opening her eyes, "tell me something. When you were a boy, did you dream of setting fires, or did you simply grow into it?" Varric's gaze snapped to her, irritation flashing. "You bait poorly, Duchess." "I am trying to understand," she said. "You speak of order, of law, but everything you do reeks of fear. What are you so afraid of that you must keep the world in chains to sleep at night?" "Witches like you," he said. "You and your illusions of kindness. You patch a child's lungs today, and tomorrow her father questions whether he needs the king's mercy at all. Magic breeds rebellion. Magic breeds choice," she said. "You are the one who chooses fire." He stepped closer, fist clenching. "Enough. Kael, last chance. Kneel, or watch what happens to those who place their hands on the king's work." He seized a torch from one of his men and held it near the stacked wood. Sera's heart stuttered. Kael moved. 1 second he stood still, the next he was a blur, half-shifted, speed unnaturally sharp. He slammed into Varric, knocking the torch aside. It spun end over end, snuffing out in the snow. Hunters shouted, steel sang. The curse surged, ecstatic. Sera felt it through the bond, the dizzying rush of letting go, of teeth and muscle, and the fierce animal joy of fighting without thought. "Kael," she cried, "you promised!" He didn't answer. The wolf roared inside him, ripping at the weakened leash, lunging for freedom.
His hands curled into claws, nails lengthening, eyes burning gold. A hunter's blade sliced across his side, blood splashed. He barely felt it. This is wrong, Sera thought. This is what the king wants. The spectacle of the cursed duke, half-beast, attacking his loyal captain in front of witnesses. Sera gritted her teeth. If she couldn't stop the fight, she could at least change its shape. She pushed her magic fully into the bond. It hurt, like forcing herself through a too narrow gap, but she did it anyway. Her aether wrapped around the connection, a second buffer between Kael and the curse. "Listen to me," she whispered, though he was yards away, locked in a vicious dance with Varric. "Kael, Wolf, whatever you call yourself, listen." He slammed Varric back against a tree. The captain's blade flashed up, slicing across Kael's forearm. The wolf snarled, baring elongated teeth. "You're not his chain," she said, breathless. "You're not his weapon. You chose your own pain once to spare another. I know that man. I touched his heart." Her magic brushed against the tangled knot of the curse. It hissed, recoiling, remembering her from the warded chamber. She didn't attack it. She didn't try to smother it this time. She simply slid between it and Kael's anger, redirecting. "You are not anger," she whispered. "You are duty. You are care. You are the man who cages himself at night so no one else bleeds. Do not give the king your rage. Give it to me." The bond flared. For an instant, sensation flooded both ways. His body, hers, overlapping. She felt the bite of cold air in his lungs, the burn of wounds, the ache in his heart. He felt the iron biting into her skin, the raw edges of her fear and determination. "Sera," he gasped, voice cracking. "Good," she said, "you can hear me." "Get out," he ground out. His grip on Varric's throat slipped. "If the curse, it already has me," she said. "We're in this together, remember." He laughed, a wild, strangled sound. The wolf bucked against the new interference, but Sera pushed harder, not at it, but at Kael's focus. "Remember the balcony," she said desperately.
"The one I saw in your memories. The night air. The weight of your mantle. You stood there and chose to carry this so someone else did not burn. That is who you are. Not this beast he forged from your fury." "How?" he gasped. "You saw." "Later," she said. "Right now, you're about to give Varric every story he wants to tell." Varric twisted in his grip, driving his knee up. Pain exploded. Kael grunted, staggered. The captain wrenched free, slashing. The blade arced toward Sera. Time seemed to slow. If he cut the ropes, she thought wildly, if he severs the net. No, Varric didn't aim for her bonds. He aimed for her throat. Kael threw himself between them. Steel bit into his shoulder instead, slicing deep. He cried out, dropping to one knee. Blood soaked his tunic, hot and sudden. "Kael!" Sera screamed. He swayed, the wolf howling inside his skull. The curse seized on the fresh pain, on the fury of the blow, on the sight of Sera bound and threatened. This time it didn't try to drag him deeper into beast shape. It tried to drag him under. Sera felt him slipping, consciousness fraying, the bond flickering. Fear knifed her. "No," she whispered, "you do not leave me here." She poured what was left of her strength into the connection, into the buffering band she'd wrapped around the curse earlier. It stretched thin, dangerously so, but held. Varric stepped back, breathing hard, blood on his blade. "See," he shouted, to his men and the handful of villagers on the edge of the camp. "The Duke cannot control his monstrous nature. He endangers everyone around him." Hunters closed in. Rowan, who had used the chaos to slip into better cover, signaled desperately to someone on the ridge.
Arrows whistled, Ardynorr's guard returning the favor Varric had shown them at the miller's. Chaos erupted fully. Sera tugged at the ropes again, ignoring the iron scream along her nerves. She didn't try to burn them this time. She focused on knots instead, on fibers loosening. Magic seeped like water between the strands, softening, swelling. One rope snapped, her wrist wrenched free. Pain jolted up her arm. She bit back a cry and clawed at the net, fingers shaking. The iron still burned, but with less direct contact, the aura's bite weakened. Almost, she panted, almost. A hunter charged toward her, sword raised. Kael moved again, staggering, wounded, but moving. He collided with the hunter, driving him to the ground. Blood smeared the snow. "Kael, stop!" Varric snarled. "Every life you take here digs your grave deeper." "That may be," Kael said hoarsely, "but I will not leave her to your fire." Power surged along the tether from the distant king, yanked taut. Sera felt it like a distant thunderclap. The curse flared, reacting to the pull. The brand over Kael's heart seared. He gasped, dropping to one palm, barely catching himself. The wolf clawed up, hungry for escape. "Enough!" Varric shouted. "This farce ends now." He tossed the torch he still carried onto the wood at Sera's feet. Flame bloomed. Heat licked at the hem of her skirts. Smoke coiled up, acrid and thick. The old terror she'd pushed down slammed into her, sharp and blinding. Not like this. Not on a stranger's pyre. Not as bait in a game between men who thought they owned her fate. Her magic, already stretched to breaking, snapped. Not outward, as it might have once, wild and uncontrolled. Inward. It folded through the bond, through the partial buffer around Kael's curse, and flared there instead, an explosion of light that wasn't fire, but felt close enough to burn. Kael cried out. For a heartbeat, everything was white. Sound vanished. The world hung suspended, pain and fear and determination all tangled. Then the light imploded, sucked back into the center, into the brand. The curse screamed. Sera heard it, not out loud, but in the space where magic lived. A wordless howl of outrage and panic as the band she'd placed around it tightened sharply, compressing. Not smothering, not yet, but squeezing. The tether to the king shuddered. Flame at her feet sputtered, then veered sideways, curling around her rather than up. The wood smoked, but did not catch fully, as if the fire had lost interest in this particular meal. The rope at her other wrist split. She jerked free, gasping, kicking away from the embers. The net slid off her shoulders, clattering. Varric stared, eyes wide. "What did you?" He didn't finish, because Kael was standing. He rose slowly, blood running down his arm, smoke clinging to his clothes. His eyes glowed, yes, but not with the feral, unfocused light of the wolf. They were clear, intent. He breathed once, twice, a third time, each exhale controlled. Sera felt it too, the difference. The curse still coiled in him, but its grip slipped, fingers numb. The king's distant pull tugged again, demanding submission, but for the first time it did not immediately land. Kael straightened fully. "Captain Holden," he said, voice quiet, "you will leave my lands now." Varric's face twisted. "You think you can defy?" "Yes," Kael said simply. "I do." The statement rang through the clearing with a weight that had nothing to do with volume. Around them, Ardynorr's guard poured in from the trees, roaring at their head, despite the blood on his face. Hunters found themselves suddenly outnumbered, bows trained on them, steel at their backs. Varric glanced around, calculating. Snow whispered as more of Kael's people stepped from cover, villagers emboldened by the sight. "You cannot hide this. The king felt that shift. He will come for you." "Let him," Kael said. "I am done crawling on his leash." "Says the man still wearing his collar," Varric snapped, gesturing to Kael's chest.
Kael's hand lifted, fingers grazing the faintly glowing brand. He smiled then, grim and a little savage. "It fits more loosely now," he said, "thanks to the woman you tried to burn." His gaze slid to Sera. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. She stood amid half-singed logs and scattered rope, hair tangled, cheeks streaked with soot. Her dress was scorched at the hem, her hands blistered. And yet she stood, eyes fierce, shoulders squared. He'd never seen anything more terrifying, or more beautiful. "We are finished with your king's cruelty," he said, looking back at Varric. "You will carry that message when you slink home. Whatever comes next, it will not be like what came before." Varric bared his teeth. "You doom your people, Ardynorr. You think the North can stand alone against the crown?" "I think," Kael said, "that a kingdom built on fear is already breaking. We simply refuse to pretend otherwise any longer." He nodded to Roran. "Escort Captain Halden and his men to the border. Disarmed, on foot. They may keep their lives. For now." "Gladly," Roran growled. Hunters hesitated. One reached for an arrow. 3 guards responded instantly, blades kissing his throat. Varric held up a hand. "Stand down," he said. His gaze never left Kael's. "This is not over." "It never is," Kael said. As the hunters were disarmed and marched past, Varric paused by Sera, eyes raking her. "You have made a powerful enemy today," he said quietly. "I already had one," she replied. "I just decided to stop pretending he deserved my fear." Something in his expression sharpened. Then he smiled, thin and deadly. "We shall see how long that bravery lasts." When they were finally gone, the camp sagged in on itself, as if some tight cord holding the air hostile had snapped. Villagers who had huddled at the edges began to drift forward, faces pale, shocked. "You should not have come," Sera said, as Kael approached, voice shaking now that the danger had passed. "You were supposed to stay where it was safe." "So were you," he said. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, and then he was there, right there, hand cupping her soot-smudged cheek, eyes searching her face like he wasn't quite sure she was real. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Blisters," she said faintly. "Bruises. Pride." He huffed out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I can live with those." "You're bleeding," she shot back. "Again." "It appears to be a habit when you are involved," he said. She swallowed. The adrenaline drained out of her, leaving her trembling. "I thought—" Her voice cracked. She stopped, unable to finish. Kael's thumb brushed away a streak of ash at her temple. "So did I," he said quietly, "and I have never been so grateful to be wrong." The bond between them hummed, not with fear or urgency this time, but with something deeper, a recognition, a choice. "We cannot go back to distance after this," she whispered, "not with hunters, curses, and kings looming, not with what we've done." "No," he agreed, "we cannot." He hesitated, just a heartbeat, as if standing on the edge of a different kind of battlefield. Then he lifted her burned hands gently, bringing them to his lips. He pressed the lightest of kisses to her knuckles, careful of the blisters. The gesture undid her. "I am done pretending this is only pretense," he said quietly, for her alone. "You are not my duchess in name only, Sera Wynverra. Whether or not the vows were meant as performance, they are real to me now." Her breath hitched. "Kael!" "I will still not demand what you do not wish to give," he said, "but I will not lie and say my heart has remained untouched." She laughed, a shaky, incredulous sound. "Mine is a disaster." "Good," he said. "We match." Snow fell softly around them, hissing as it met the smoldering edges of the aborted pyre. In the distance, Varric and his men trudged toward the horizon, stripped of their weapons, but not of their purpose. This was not an ending, Sera knew. It was a line drawn, a first real defiance. The king would feel the slack in his leash. He would pull. Sera laced her fingers through Kael's, ignoring the sting. He squeezed gently back. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "we face it together. No more cages alone." His gaze held hers, steady and fierce. "Together," he agreed. Above them, the clouds shifted, revealing a ragged patch of sky. The pale sun, weak but stubborn, broke through for the first time that day. The warmth of it on Sera's face felt like a promise, not of safety perhaps, but of something better, of a fight they had chosen, of a love that had stopped being pretend the moment they both stepped into the fire. Winter did not break that year, it changed shape. Snow still fell over Varynmoor, piling along the roads and softening the jagged hills. But inside Ardynorr's walls, something had shifted. People walked with shoulders a little straighter, the guards trained with a new edge in their eyes. Even the servants in the kitchens laughed more freely, the sound echoing up the stone corridors. Word of what happened in the hunters' camp spread faster than any rider. Some versions said the Wolf Duke had torn Varric Haldan's throat out and drunk his blood. Others claimed Sera Wynverra turned the fire to snow with a single word. Neither was true, not exactly. The truth, that they had stood together, that a witch had faced down the king's leash and blunted it, was stranger than the stories. Kael spent the first days after the confrontation in a blur of decisions. He dispatched messengers to neighboring lords, carefully worded letters laying out what had happened before rumors warped it beyond recognition. "I will not hide it," he told Sera as they stood over the maps in the war room, candles burning low. "But neither will I give the king the satisfaction of painting this as madness. This was justice." "Do you think they will see it that way?" she asked. "Some will," he said. "Some will be terrified. Some will look to see which way the wind is blowing before moving at all. But they will all know this: the North is no longer quietly obedient." "Has it ever been quietly obedient?" she asked. He huffed out a breath. "Loudly resentful, perhaps. Quietly compliant? No longer." He expected a response from the capital within days, an army, perhaps, or a blizzard of decrees. It did not come. What came instead were letters. One from Lord Taryn in the east, written in tight, anxious script, asking if the rumors were true, if Kael had truly defied a king's captain and lived. Another from Lady Myrrel of the Western Passes, her words cool and precise. "I do not approve of rash gestures, but I have grown weary of pyres." She offered no open support, yet. And then, surprisingly, a short, blunt note from Lord Edvar, who had always seemed firmly in the king's pocket. "I heard what happened. I have 2 granddaughters with spark under their skin. Do not fall." "I did not expect him," Sera murmured after reading that one. "He refused to send his healers when the last plague came through." "Fear makes cowards," Kael said. "It also makes men notice when the fire gets too close to their own door." At night, they no longer occupied separate ends of the keep. The first evening after the camp, Sera returned to her chambers to find the connecting door to Kael's old rooms standing open. No fanfare, no announcement, just open, as if it had never been locked. She paused on the threshold, heart tripping. He sat by the hearth, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled up, one arm wrapped in fresh bandages. Papers were spread on the low table, ignored. "Roran's handwriting is worse than a drunk spider's," he said without looking up. "I am beginning to suspect he becomes deliberately illegible when delivering bad news." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What news is bad enough to make him sabotage ink?" "He thinks the king will bide his time," Kael said, "that he will not march an army this far north in the dead of winter for the sake of one disobedient duke and his witch. He will wait, for spring, for allies, for a more elegant blow." "Roran is not wrong," Sera said. "The king strikes from shadows as often as from the field." Kael nodded slowly. "Which gives us time to shore up supplies."
to see which nobles grumble but stay, and which begin to edge away from the king's heel. He gestured to the chair opposite. Also, to stop shouting at you from down the hall. She sat, smoothing her skirt unnecessarily. I have missed your shouting. He smiled, tired and crooked. You mistake my tone. That is my deeply concerned and terrible at expressing it. I know, she said softly. Silence settled between them, warm, threaded with things unsaid. I meant what I said in the camp, he began, about being done pretending, about how I see you now. But I also meant what I said before. I will not demand more than you wish to give. Her fingers curled around the edge of the chair. And if I wish to give more. His breath caught. The fire popped, sending a swirl of sparks up the chimney. Sera watched them for a moment, gathering the scattered pieces of her courage. I did not plan to care for you, she said, not beyond gratitude, and the vague, abstract fondness one feels for a storm that happened to blow the right way. You were a vow, a shield, a problem. An accurate summation, he said dryly. And yet, she went on, you keep coming between me and fire. That is the natural instinct of a wolf, he said, to place himself between danger and his... He stopped, a flush rising along his cheekbones. Pack, she supplied gently. He huffed. If I call you my pack, Elowyn will mock me for a year. She already mocks you for less, Sera said. I have heard her. True, he conceded. She shifted her chair closer. Not too close. Close enough that the heat from his side of the hearth brushed her knees. When Varric threw that torch, she said, I realized something. I did not fear death as much as I feared leaving you under that chain without someone to tell you that you deserved better than what he did to you. Kael's throat worked. Sera, that is not obligation speaking, or debt, or the life bond. It is mine, my choice, my heart thoroughly inconvenienced. A laugh escaped him then, raw, startled. You have a gift for turning declarations into critiques. It is a very annoying heart, she agreed. It wants to share its burdens. It refuses to sit quietly in the corner while you decide to suffer alone for my sake. He stared at her, something unguarded in his eyes. You would tether yourself to a man who brings the king's wrath to his doorstep? Who howls at the moon? Who still carries a curse on his skin? Yes, she said simply, because he hurts when others suffer. Because he chose chains once to spare someone else. Because he tried to build a cage around himself rather than risk biting the people he loves. Because he is trying, God's help him, to be better than the leash he was given. A long silence followed.
The kind that felt less like absence and more like a held breath. Come here, he said. She stood. Her legs felt strangely unsteady, though she'd spent all day on them without trouble. Crossing the small space between them felt longer than the ride to the miller's hamlet. He rose too, despite the ache in his ribs, and met her halfway. This is not thank you, he said quietly. It is not a boon. It is not an obligation, she finished. I know. He reached up, brushing a loose curl back from her face. His fingers were warm, calloused, gentle in a way she suspected very few had ever seen. Last chance to decide I am too much trouble, he murmured. Too late, she said. I decided you were too much trouble the first night. I simply also decided you were worth it. He laughed softly. Then he kissed her. There was nothing hurried or claiming in it, no desperate grasping edge, just a careful, aching reverence, like a man touching something precious he was still half afraid would vanish. Sera leaned into it,
into him, into the warmth of his hand at her waist. Her burned palms stung where they pressed against his chest, but she didn't pull away. It felt right, somehow, that the places they'd hurt most were the ones touching now. When they parted, they rested their foreheads together, breath mingling. "If the king sends an army," she said softly, "this will get messier." "It will," he agreed. "Some nights the curse will snarl," she said. "We may have to fight it again. Together." "We will," he said. "Some mornings I will forget which fork to use," she added. He smiled into her hair. "Then the servants will gossip, and Elowyn will despair, and the world will continue to turn." "Good," she said. "I can live with that." He held her a little tighter. "So can I." Days stretched into weeks. Winter dug in its heels, refusing to relinquish its hold. The king did not march. Varric did not return. Instead, news trickled up the roads alongside traders and travelers. 3 villages in the south had refused to hand over suspected witches. A small baron had quietly allowed his hedge mage to slip away before the hunters arrived. In the capital itself, a group of priests had spoken cautiously of mercy in their sermons, thin cracks in the stone of fear. "Change comes in whispers," Elowyn said, as she and Sera sorted letters in the solar. "Rarely in thunder." "I said rarely," Vajia replied. "I said rarely, not never." She glanced at Sera over the top of a scroll. "You realize, of course, that when history tells this story, it will make Kael the hero." Sera smiled faintly. "You object?" "I object to accuracy being sacrificed for romance," Elowyn said.
You are the one who reached into a king's curse twice. You are the one who kept the ledgers from collapsing while we were busy throwing ourselves at magic and torches, Sera said. Yes, Elowyn said, a little smug, and I expect at least one ballad about that. Sera laughed. They were in the gardens when the first messenger from the south arrived, mud-splattered, damp, shivering. He bowed before Kael and Sera with more enthusiasm than grace. "My lords," he said, then corrected hastily, "My lord, my lady, I bring word from Lord Edvar." Kael's brows rose. "The man of terrible fashion and worse manners?" "The same," the messenger said breathlessly. "He writes to say he will not send his mages to the capital for inspection, and he asks if Ardynorr stands as firmly as the rumors claim." Sera exchanged a glance with Kael. "What answer do we send?" she asked. Kael's gaze turned distant for a moment, weighing. Then his jaw firmed. "The truth," he said. "Tell him yes. Tell him Varynmoor stands. That we will not surrender our witches, our healers, our shifters, our people. That if the king comes for us, we will meet him at our own gates, not crawling on his palace floor." The messenger swallowed. "He will not like that answer." "The king?" Kael asked. "Lord Edvar," the messenger said. "He hates commitment." Kael snorted. "Then it is past time he learned it." The messenger left with his reply. Others came. Some brought cautious letters. Others brought only questions in their eyes. Sera found herself in the odd position of being asked for counsel by nobles who once have sneered at her cottage. They wrote to her now as Duchess, as witch, as the woman who had touched a king's spell and survived. "Do you ever think," she asked Kael one evening as they walked the inner wall, snow crunching under their boots, "that we might be the ones who started something we cannot finish?" "Every day," he said. "That is why we gather others, so we are not the only ones carrying it." She stared out over the white fields, the distant dark line of forest. Somewhere beyond those trees, beyond the frozen rivers and mountain passes, a king sat on a throne built on fear, feeling his leash slip a little more each day. "Do you think he will come?" she asked quietly. "In person?" "Eventually," Kael said. Men like him hate loose ends. When he does, we will have a choice. Kneel, fight, or change the ground beneath his feet. Change, she repeated. How? He glanced at her. By making the thing he fears less useful to him. You mean magic? He said. I mean control, he replied. So long as he can twist Aether into chains, he will. What if your kind refused to be bound that way? What if you taught others how to cut their own collars? She thought of the knot in his chest, of the way it had screamed when she tightened the band around it, of the way the tether to the king had shuddered. It would be dangerous, she said. Yes, he agreed. But if witches learned to see how his bindings work, they could refuse them, or slip them. He would lose his most effective tool. He would try to burn us faster, she said. He is already burning you, Kael said. At least this way, you choose the pyres you build. She walked in silence for a moment, digesting that. Snowflakes settled on her lashes, cold and soft. I could teach them, she said slowly. The ones who still live, the ones hiding, how to feel the difference between their magic and someone else's, how to resist when it coils wrong. You could, he said. You would be putting a target on your back the size of a mountain. I have one already, she said. At least this way, it might be useful. He stopped, turning to face her. I will not ask this of you. You don't have to, she said. I am asking it of myself. His mouth twitched. Stubborn witch. Stubborn duke, she countered. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. The simple contact still surprised her sometimes. How natural it felt now. Then we start small, he said. With letters, with whispers. A line in a missive to Lord Edvar's granddaughters with spark, perhaps. Advice hidden between talk of harvests. And if the king intercepts them, she asked. He will wonder why we are so interested in cabbages, Kael said solemnly. She laughed, a puff of white in the cold air. You are getting better at this humor thing. It is a coping mechanism, he said. They walked on. That night, when the moon rose, Kael did not retreat to the warded room. He stood in their chamber instead, shirt off, the brand on his chest visible in the hearthlight. It glowed faintly, as it always did, but the edges were softer now, less like chains, more like a scar that had begun to heal from the inside out. Are you certain? Sera asked, standing close enough to feel his warmth. No, he said, but I am tired of locking myself away from you. If the curse surges, you will feel it, he said, and so will I. We are not walking into this blind anymore. She studied the mark, the web of magic threaded through it. It is not broken. No, he agreed, but it does not own me, not the way it did. She lifted her hand, hesitating. May I? He nodded. Her palm settled over the brand. The now familiar rush of sensation swept through her. His heartbeat, his breath, the underlying hum of the curse. It stirred, recognizing her, but without the immediate hungry lunge it had shown before. Hello again, she murmured to it. Behave, Kael huffed under his breath. She smiled, focusing. It's like a knot in a rope, she said slowly. We have loosened some threads. The whole thing is weaker, but if we yank, we risk snapping it and the rope both. In which metaphor, I assume, I am the rope, he asked. Yes, she said, fragile, fraying rope. He made an affronted noise. I will have you know. Her laughter cut him off. She let her magic seep just enough to feel the pattern, not enough to challenge it. The curse pulsed, then settled. Not gone, not harmless, but quieter. I can live with this, she said. Can you? He asked quietly. Living with a man who will always have some shadow of another's making inside him? She looked up, meeting his gaze. We all carry others inside us, she said. Teachers, ghosts, fears, hopes. You are more than the worst of what was done to you. The curse is not the only thing in there. He swallowed. What else do you see? Duty, she said. Grief, stubbornness, a frankly alarming capacity for self-sacrifice, and kindness buried under too many layers of armor.
"Armor is useful," he said. "So is knowing when to take it off," she replied. His hand came up, covering hers over his heart, pressing it there. "For you," he said softly, "I will try." That was all she'd ever asked. Spring came late to the north. When it did, it arrived tentatively, thin green shoots pushing through the last of the snow, rivers groaning as ice loosened its grip. The villagers planted with wary hope, glancing at the roads as often as at the sky. The king did not march. Whispers from the south said he had troubles closer to home, small uprisings, disobedient priests, nobles dragging their feet. The leash around the realm's neck had begun to chafe in more places than Varynmoor. "Varric?" Sera asked one day as she and Kael watched the thaw from the wall. "Recalled," Kael said, "according to the last report. Some say he is being reassigned. Others say he is in the dungeons, accused of mishandling the situation here." "He did exactly what the king wanted," she said. "Men like that are tools," Kael said. "When they fail, the king breaks them to reassure himself his hand is still strong." Sera shivered. Not for Varric, there was little sympathy in her for the man who had bound her to a stake, but for what it said about the mind that ruled them all. "He will send others," she said. "Yes," Kael said, "but next time they will not find us waiting alone." He was right. Letters arrived with more open defiance now. Lords and ladies who had once walked carefully around the subject of magic began to mention it plainly. Lady Myril wrote, "My steward's son has a spark. I will not give him up. I hear your witch knows how to blunt the worst of the king's chains. We should talk." "The priests here speak of mercy more than fire. One was arrested. The people are restless. If you stand, we may have more than whispers soon. Even Lord Edvar, king of prevarication, sent, 'My granddaughters say your teachings are tedious and your metaphors mixed. They adore you. The eldest has cut through 2 minor bindings already. The palace mages are baffled. Well done.'" Sera read that last one twice, laughing until her sides hurt. "It seems," Kael said, watching her, "that you are becoming a problem for people who truly deserve it." "Good," she said. "It's about time." They stood together, watching the first real sun they'd seen in months cast light across the thawing fields. "There will be battles," Kael said quietly. "Not all with steel. Some in council chambers, some in hearts. We will lose ground some days. We will doubt. We will make mistakes." "Yes," she said, "that is how change works." He slid his arm around her waist, pulling her gently against his side. "There will also be dinners where you insist on using the wrong fork. I have learned, mostly. Children who pile wolf pup onto your lap during council," he continued, ignoring her, "because they have decided you are safer than their nursemaid." "I encourage this," she said. "Plants in the great hall," he went on, mock dismayed. "Herbs hanging from rafters meant for banners. We need easy access to remedies," she said, "and it makes the place smell less like old stone and more like life." He smiled down at her. "There will be nights when the curse snarls, when fear crawls in, when the old habits of distance whisper that they would be easier. On those nights," she said, "we will remember this. We chose this together, not as shield and burden, not as life debt and duchess. As 2 very stubborn, very tired people who decided to stop letting fear write all the rules." He studied her face, something soft in his gaze. "You make it sound almost simple," he said. "It isn't," she replied, "but if we say it enough times, it might feel simpler on the worst days." He laughed quietly. Down in the courtyard, a child shrieked with delight as a young wolf pup, one of the keep's half-tame, all-mischief pack, stole her scarf and darted away, tail wagging furiously. A guard gave half-hearted chase, slipping in the meltwater. Laughter rolled up the walls. "Look at them," Sera said. "Afraid, and yet still laughing, still planting, still living." "Defiance takes many forms," Kael said.
Sometimes it is drawing a sword. Sometimes it is hanging Frostbloom in the great hall because the king would prefer you didn't. She leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of leather, pine, and the faint, almost imagined edge of wild that always clung to him.
"We will be all right," she said, surprising herself with how much she believed it. "We will be something," he replied. "All right may be too ambitious." She smiled. "We will be alive. Together. That is enough." His arm tightened around her. It was not a fairy tale ending. There would be no neat vanquishing of a distant king in a single stroke, no sudden dawn where all chains fell and no one ever burned again. But as Sera stood on the wall of Ardynorr Keep, hand entwined with that of the man she had once thought of only as a story in tavern whispers, she felt something settle inside her. It was not the comfortable quiet of a life untouched. It was the steadier, stronger calm of a heart that had chosen its storms. Below, Frostbloom buds pushed through thawing soil, stubborn and bright against the lingering patches of snow. They would bloom soon. So would the world they were trying, clumsily, bravely, to reshape. Sera Wynverra, witch and duchess, leaned into her Wolf Duke as the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest scent of green. Whatever came, they would meet it side to side. And for the first time in a very long time, that felt like more than survival. It felt like hope.